201 South Roslyn Avenue, Orlando, Florida, to discuss Vision 2050 Work Group. If you are making public comment, please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. So I will start off the meeting making a quick comment and then pass it over to my colleagues. So Vision 2050, which had actually started under a different name back in 2017, 2018 or so, was started when I, as a citizen, was coming to the county with a whole bunch of others complaining about the Lake Pickett developments, and it was so contentious, and it's at 2 a.m. in the morning, the BCC meetings, that, you know, after that had happened, Mayor Jacobs said that, oh my gosh, my Boston accent just came out, Mayor. Mayor Jacobs had stated that she didn't want to really have that contention anymore, really wanted solution to making sure that we had planning that was predictable and that really made it in a way so that the public knew what was coming into their neighborhoods and that they were in agreement with it. It's so that we were growing the way the public, the residents of Orange County wanted us to grow, or, you know, preserve your neighborhoods. So that was the first reason why this project had started. And then it got into, you know, staff going into it and delving into it and trying to, now we have this huge population coming and how are we going to deal with them? And so those seem to be the two factors that created and started Vision 2050 and why we're doing this. During the process, definitely there were, you know, some issues. We worked out some of them, but there's still a lot more. And so we, you know, put together some citizens. I have a work group together that's been working on some of the concerns and doing some of the research, because it's definitely a huge document, a lot of work, a lot of research to do. And so this, definitely we have to speak together too on some of these issues, because I don't know what District 3 and District 4 are dealing with. They don't know what I'm dealing with. And so this is an opportunity for us to speak to each other in a transparent way with Sunshine Meeting and see what all the concerns are and how we could resolve some of these. So I will turn it, and I did invite Public Works, because transportation seems to be missing from Vision 2050. And I also invited the Orange County Public Schools, so we do have a representative from them as well. So I'm gonna pass it over to District 3, Myra Uribe.
Good evening, everyone. Did everyone get a donut? Okay. Know that the donuts are here again. Shipley's Donuts on Cimarron. I think this is great. I want to thank everyone who came out tonight, because many of you know by now that since the beginning I've had some concerns. And while we've worked through some concerns, I still think we have more to do. I'm glad to report, though, that some of my concerns in my district are being handled. And I'm glad to have a rep here. Tina's amazing and very, very knowledgeable and has been vocal and organizing and keeping our residents informed. I'm happy to see residents from our district out in the community, so thank you so much. But what I really wanted to accomplish today, I know my district. I don't know District 4 and what issues are important to District 4. I don't know what issues are important to District 5. We're saddened not to have Commissioner Wilson with us tonight, but we don't know what's important to District 1, District 6, and District 2. So it is very key that you all are here, because we don't have this opportunity to engage when we're back here on the dais. And I will tell you, and I don't want to be in any way shameful, but I voted no when this went through the first time, because I knew we still had a long way to go. And I'm so happy that the commissioners now have dug in and put a lot more thought, and you all have come back to your commissioners and said, hey, we've got these issues, and this is why we're meeting today. So this is really a public forum. It doesn't normally get to happen. And it's good and bad and ugly. You know, I don't want you to think, I'm thankful for, we have a city council member from the city of Edgewood here. This is not our Vision 2050. This is our Vision 2050, okay? And I think we're only here for a certain time. We all have term limits. But what we do know is that this living document will go on for the next 30 years. And we all have to live in this community with this document. And I'm going to stop talking, but I just really do want to thank you. And I want you to also know that it doesn't stop today. This isn't a dead zone. This is, you may take back something you hear today by hearing us and write the mayor and make your voices heard, because Transparency in government is the key thing why we're doing this tonight. We all know that you could be home watching Jeopardy, and we could be home with our families, and you all with your families, but you know how important and critical this is to our community. So with that, I look forward to hearing from people. I encourage you to take an opportunity and tell us, because I know I want to hear from the residents of other districts. And I think that while there is a shift going, we want to make sure that we also are protective of transportation and infrastructure going forward. And that, it's so sad that Commissioner Wilson's not here, because you have seen the tragedy that's happening in District 1 when those things haven't coincided with the rapid growth. I'm different. I'm an infill district, but I'm already up to my neck. Traffic is horrible, right, council member? We have these issues going on so aggressively, and we have nowhere to go. So that's why it's so critical that these decisions be made, because not all of us are the same. So thank you all, and look forward to hearing from you. And Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Really, this is good. It's 6:30. I mean, at this time, we already, starting our meetings for community meetings or anything. So we're used to this, but we have to say thank you. And I can see how many people come at this time, right, Commissioner? Not earlier or in the morning, so that's good. So I want to say that District 4, most of the concerns that have been coming, and we had our last Vision 2050 community meeting in Timber Creek last Thursday. It was good. It was long, but most of the questions, or almost all of them, were answered. The staff was very, active by answering all those questions. And one of the, well, not one, but several of the questions and concerns that my people have in District 4 is that they think that it's not defined, the limits in the maps are not defined, and they want to know, with orange code, so they want to know that. That's mostly one of their concerns. And another thing that they are also concerned is it's the same thing. That Vision 2050 and the comp plan density and intensity should be applied to countywide PDs. So there are some concerns and there are some issues that are going on, and I think we still have enough time to answer and to correct whatever it is, and we are here because we want to know, learn from you and listen what concerns and so you have. So thank you for being here, and let's start because there's a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. So right now, we're going to open it up to public comment, and we're going to give it about a half an hour. So hopefully we could get through all the public comments in a half an hour. You're going to get 2 minutes each. So if you just want to line up along this wall here, we can have you go to the podium and state your name and address for the record. We do have an elected official, correct? Yes. So he could go first. Commissioner from City of Edgewood. All right, go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Richard Horn, and I'm not here for the City of Edgewood. However, I am a City Council President for the City of Edgewood. As I continue to learn more and more about this, it becomes more and more concerning. And as I was just driving here, in fact, I didn't even think that I was going to come to speak here. I just immediately decided I think I want to speak. So I don't have anything prepared. I don't have anything on my phone. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm just speaking from the heart. How is public service, how is public safety going to be addressed on this? How is schools going to be addressed on this? How is transportation going to be addressed on this? How is utilities going to be addressed on this? So if you take a property that is zoned currently for, 4 dwelling units an acre, and it now becomes 6, 8, 10 dwelling units an acre or more, how are you dealing with the increased traffic, the increased schooling, the increased utilities, electric, water, sewer? How are you going to deal with all of that? I mean, it's like the cost, when I think about it, it expands exponentially. Last night, in our city council meeting, we were working on our budget and working on our millage in the city of Edgewood. We were presented with a new fire cost to the city of Edgewood, because we contract with Orange County Fire, that the Orange County Board of Commissioners put forth to us I don't care, like, don't stop me. It's the Board of County Commissioners in Orange County put forth to us a 30% increase, 36% increase year over year to a municipality. We can't afford this. We had to raise our millage. We had to set our millage another 0.5. So we went from 0.525 to 0.575 and are still going to have to drop into our reserves to cover that. So everything else, that's just for one aspect of public service. 2 minutes is not enough. You understand what I'm saying? This has to be like tabled for a long time to think out all the details. Thank you.
Thank you. I know 2 minutes is really quick. I apologize, but hopefully we can have more meetings and have more communications. All right. Just state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, Matthew Gerholski, 1701 Lee Road, Winter Park. Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Gerholski, as previously stated, and I serve as the campaign strategy lead for the Sunrise Movement Orlando. Our goal is to build a more sustainable, walkable, and brighter Orlando and Orange County. Vision 2050 is a plan that needs reform to create that vision of Orlando that we want to see. We have been part of the process by attending environmental stakeholder meetings with your offices, and these exact types of forums. We have seen a lot of progress, but as Commissioner Uribe said, there's still more to do. And that more includes removing parking mandates a half-mile around transit hubs. Removing that mandate provides flexibility and is supported by a wide and diverse coalition of people, including environmentalists, developers, and small business owners as well. We don't face or spearhead these calls without precedent. Austin, Texas, Raleigh, North Carolina, Anchorage, Alaska, Lexington, Kentucky, just to name a few, have removed or restricted parking mandates as of late. These are cities with no public transit or as much public transit as possible. This isn't a thing that we have been advocating for without acknowledgement of our communities here, marginalized communities out in Pine Hills, student populations out in UCF. Congressman Maxwell Alejandro Frost actually has a roundtable with our membership to discuss support for this policy that we're trying to propose. All I'm going to ask is that you think of our future generations here in Orlando, in Orange County, and you just finally just remove that red tape that is needed. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carmen Arroyo. My address is 4504 Commander Drive, Orlando, Florida, 32822. My name is Carmen Arroyo, and I'm a lead organizer for Unite Here Local 737. I have lived in Orange County for over 4 years, and I currently live in District 3 on Cimarron. I am here with a statement from Unite Here Local 737 about how you should consider hotel development as the county grows this fast. We're focused on hotels because they are our union main industry, and we have a lot of experience with hotels development and how it is impact our members. When I first arrived here, I worked as a housekeeper. In my career as an organizer, I have talked to thousands of workers, hotels workers in union and non-union hotels. Some of them work for very low pay and drive extremely long distances because they can afford to live closer to work. Many of our members also live in neighborhoods in Orange County where they have seen the county grow so fast around them. When land is being developed, hotels are one of the highest impact uses on the neighborhood around it. It takes the neighborhood away from residents and toward tourists, which can impact traffic, housing, and flow of people through the area. That's not always a bad thing. We love hotels. They can be great things for neighborhood, but they can also be very negative. It is important to take a careful look each time to make sure we get it right. We suggest two things to the county, and we'll like to hear your thoughts from the commissioner to staff. I know that I don't have time, but I already share some of those points with you. Thank you, and I would like to hear about your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to confirm that the comptroller got a copy of the handout?
No.
No?
You give her a copy for over there. Thank you.
All right, next person could just come up. Next in line?
Hi, my name is Kelly Carr. I live 2929 Alamo Drive, that's District 3. And most of my questions are directed at District 3. The first is just what Alan was talking about. We don't have the infrastructure that we need. There's not a master plan in place for Vision 2050 for there again, I'm referring to our area, Lake Holden, for traffic, stormwater runoff, connecting to septic. Is that something that we can request to have that done?
I'm trying.
Okay, thank you. Also, in our area, we have hundreds of heritage-type trees, which are oak trees that are over, 14 feet in diameter. They're huge. Some new protection for them, because if this happens, we're going to lose a lot of those trees. They can't be replaced. Also, I just noticed that there's a preservation sector. And is that something that with lakefront that maybe we can
I'll let you
look at?
finish and then I'll give you the update, so.
I'm sorry?
I'll let you finish and then I'll give you the update.
Okay, I gotta hurry. Anyway, I wanted to look at that. And then also, I keep looking at the map and things that we have talked about in our past meetings about the zoning. When I go and look at the map, it hasn't changed. It's still the higher zoning, like our area is not showing as being the established neighborhood. Also, some of the areas, when you look at it on the map, it's still showing the higher density, the T4.3, where it should be T3.2, but it's not shown. And I know y'all this is going to be going into effect in August, the final draft, and I just want to be sure that map is going to be correct.
Yes, Ms. Carr, the other thing that you didn't talk about was lake quality, because we have a lot of lakes. And yes, I have the new plans, and we did get the established area submitted. And we'll discuss that more when we talk, but yes,
Okay.
okay?
When I pull it up, though, and I pulled it up today, it wasn't showing correct.
Okay,
So-
I'll make sure that
Okay.
those updates. Right. Absolutely. Yeah, okay. We're going to let the other comments, I'm going to try not to interject as much. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Frank Corso, 3651 North Goldenrod Road, Winter Park. So I guess I don't really have anything prepared, so I'm just going to go for it. So I'd say probably one of the most important things for me is just sort of, how is the county going to address the issue of pedestrian safety? So a lot of the roads in Orlando and Orange County in general are what some might describe as a strode, sort of a mix between a street and a road. It is trying to have the high-capacity throughput that you see on a highway, but also trying to have access to businesses and neighborhoods. And that is usually considered one of the worst type of roads you could build. And because of that, we need to account for pedestrian safety. Like no, I always roll my eyes when I see those 2-foot gutters on the side of the road. It's like, I'm not gonna ever bike in that. And it's, no one really should, in my opinion. They're too dangerous to use. And so we need to have better, essentially protected bike infrastructure for cyclists. We need to have there be a buffer between pedestrians and the road. We don't need these roads where the sidewalk is right against this 45, 50 mile per hour traffic. And then we also have a bunch of other problems, like the fact that there's often no trees on the road. There's no shading. And so it's just absolutely insufferable to walk around, just because everything's so car oriented, it's so spread out that it's very difficult to be a pedestrian. And I think we need to very much address like the way that if we're going to upzone, we're going to increase transportation, we need to make sure that people have other means. Otherwise, we're going to just have this explosion of traffic because everyone's going to drive. And I think that's a very, very important thing for the county to consider. And overall, I think we need to really focus on that aspect and not just, everything else we're doing. We need to really make sure that we're keeping people safe no matter how they're getting around. Okay. I have not read it recently, no.
Let's keep the public comment going. Don't you have road sections in that vision?
They do have some type of road, but we're gonna keep the public comment going though. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, all of Vision 2050 is online. There have the maps online, you can check your addresses and everything as well, and orange code, so I highly recommend going. I know it's a lot, but try going through it and reading and checking your address as well. Sorry, let's continue.
My name is Angela Emerson. I live at 14729 Baltusrol Drive on the east side, District 4. I have 2, maybe 3, if I have time, concerns. One is about existing approved projects that we're not maybe accounting for when we look at the plan. For instance, I was just reading today about a project that was approved in 2020, but they're just breaking ground for it in 2025. When new proposals come across, for approval, are we actually looking at the existing pending projects as if they're in place already? Because if we're not factoring, something I emailed the commissioner about today is there is a safe level, like for instance, stormwater management. If we're not actually looking at the big picture of everything that's already in the docket, we'll find ourselves in a mess then once everything comes to fruition. So that was one concern. And then I hear a lot of being said that Orange Code and the vision is to produce predictability. However, it's not always a one-size-fits-all. So let's just say, for example, I fit in a certain transact. However, are they factoring in certain environmental conditions within that transact? For instance, District 4 is huge, and I know they voted to increase densities and capacity for District 4 up to a high amount, and yet not all of District 4 has the same ability necessarily to handle stormwater. For instance, I live in a Econ basin, so things work a little bit different where I live versus maybe somewhere else in the district. I think that was, yeah. And then also using updated maps. So whatever the vision is, I feel like that's one area in Orange County that we've kind of slipped on, is making sure that where our plan is, we have an updated stormwater map or whatever when we're making those plans. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cassie Lynch. I live at 2324 Woodhill Avenue, and this is actually my first time really hearing about these public meetings for this. There's actually no information on social media really for this meeting in specific. I got an email from Ms. Uribe's office to come and attend due to some other issues, but my real issue is when I looked at that map, my specific area is Curry Ford between Econ and Chickasaw, and our little bit of A2 land there, including conservation land and up to the Walmart, is a targeted district. But for some reason, the A2 homes on the other side of the housing development are not, as well as the other A2 homes next to the Azalea Park Canal. They're also not a target, even though they're single family, the same as ours. And my big issue is this, is we have so much issues with flooding in this area due to the Rio Pinar Canal and the issues with the non-maintenance of the Rio Pinar Canal, which that conservation area does attribute to, that the water is backing up onto our property and flowing out. When we had the storm on the 25th of June, it came so fast, and the pipes under Curry Ford cannot handle it. My parents argued with them when they put it in the early 2000s. They needed bigger pipes under that road to move this water. The water was coming through so fast through our little swale that it actually eroded out our little land bridge. And this has never happened before. It didn't happen during Ian, Charlie, tons of these other big flood producing. And I'm just really concerned that why is our little lower issue with flooding area targeted for dense infill, but these high dry lands just across the neighborhood or just up the street or not? It's just, I'm really worried about the flooding in this area, because I know there's plans to fix Rio Pinar further up in the neighborhood by Econ, but our issues are south, and that stuff up there hits us all the way to Curry Ford. And it's supposed to go into the water plant, into the little Econ River, Azalea Park Canal. And it doesn't feel like it's going under Curry Ford into the water plant property and draining properly. It's just backing up onto us, flowing back into the road, pipes aren't big enough, and it's just a circle of flooding. And eventually, my mom's house is probably gonna go underwater. Hasn't yet, but every year it gets worse and worse. All right, thank you.
Hello, my name is Ana Paula Perea Naves. I live at 860 North Orange Avenue, and I live in District 3. I want to talk about three things, which is the dynamic pricing proposals, if there are any, on the I-4 Express. As I live in District 3, my biggest concern is traffic on I-4, not even peak times, just all the time. So dynamic pricing, I have seen, maybe we are leaning that way or not. HOV lanes, I do want to see proposal, if there is one in the future, 25 years from now. We've seen it on I-10 in Houston. We've seen it on I-95, where they have not only the HOV benefits, but also for hybrid vehicles, they get the taxation benefit. So that would motivate me more to purchase a EV or hybrid. And my last concern as a District 3 resident is the ramp going on to I-4 West. Every time I go see my lovely mother, who lives in District 6, I have to struggle with maybe giving people the patience who are turning onto Huey Avenue. Should I let them merge or not is always my dilemma. So maybe if they have out-of-state plates, I will let them, more likely than not, I will let them merge, because I'm like, you don't really know the culture here. We've had this issue for well over 3 years from now. So anybody who is on the lane to turn onto Huey Avenue, but does that last minute, does feel like it's malicious. So maybe like a sign or something that says this lane only would be really beneficial as a District 3 resident. That's all. Thank you so much.
Anna, I'm going to have my aide talk to you, because obviously I-4 is FDOT, and actually all the on and off ramps are the city of Orlando, but we're still going to try and work with this, okay?
Sweet, thank you.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amber Homburger. I reside at 620 Kittredge Drive in zip code 32805, which is District 6. So I'm happy, I think I'm one of the only residents here from District 6, so I'm happy to provide that perspective. I'm also a member of Orlando YIMBY, and so we advocate for smart growth, attainable priced housing, and accessible, reliable transit. So I am a proponent of Vision 2050 because it addresses several major needs that we have in District 6, which are namely increased attainable housing, expanded transit, which will then bring residents access to local businesses. So in 2023, the county's community needs assessment reported that more than 40% of residents were rent burdened. And the National Low-Income Housing Association has found that Orlando has only 18 affordable units for every 100 residents considered extremely low income. So we know countywide that there is a massive housing shortage. We know that specifically there's a shortage of affordable priced housing, and particularly in District 6. We're a part of the city and of the county that is focused and targeted on homeless prevention services, shelters, affordable housing communities, and so we're kind of known for that, but there's still not enough. Our residents also really value the opportunity to be entrepreneurs and to build up their businesses. I live right off of East Colonial and OBT, which has, I think, frankly, been blighted the past few years with several major local businesses shutting down. And so, we support Vision 2050 because it supports the ability for residents to get to our area, to access our local businesses, and for our predominantly low-income residents to actually be able to get to work, to be able to live in areas close to where they work. So I am also a huge proponent of the parking minimums elimination. Emphasizing use on our transit system and making it even more robust can only help every member of our community. Folks who are using it have better access. Folks who aren't using it have reduced cars on the road. So it's good for everybody. And Orlando is one of the only major metropolitan areas in the United States without comprehensive transit. So it's a desperate need of ours, and Vision 2050 will help us move that needle. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Lane. I live at 503 Fitzwilliam Way. And I had the good fortune to move here from Switzerland. And I think that how I lived there is exactly what this Vision 2050 is wanting to achieve. We chose our house because there was a bus stop within a mile, and my husband planned to do what he did in Switzerland and take the bus into work and take it home. That was not feasible. It was going to be over a 2-hour commute, and during busy season, there would be no way for him to get home, even if he got into work at a decent time. Now the closest bus stop is well over a mile away, close to 2 miles, and it doesn't go downtown. It goes out to Bithlow. So I very much would love to have the opportunity to live like we did when we were living in Europe. But in this time frame, you've taken away what we had. I don't see a possibility of bringing back what we did have, which is not feasible for a professional to use. I can't imagine how it would be feasible for someone else. And I am very concerned that we don't have the means to make it happen the way that you want it to. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Robert Perez. I reside in 12202 Knights Crossing Circle.
Sorry, can you repeat your name?
What?
Your name?
Robert Perez. Yeah, 12202 Knights Crossing Circle, 32817, District 5. Safe streets needs to be the #1 priority of Vision Zero. We can have the most mixed use, dense neighborhoods with the best transit, but if people don't feel safe walking to the street with cars flying by 50 miles per hour, they're gonna drive, right? They don't feel safe outside of a car. It's ridiculous how the areas around UCF, such as University Boulevard, where there are a lot of students who don't have access to cars, yet it's such a dangerous street. I also support removing parking minimums. Cities around the world show how removing parking minimums has had a large impact on housing prices, and the sky didn't fall from lack of parking. We should let businesses and developers decide how much parking they really need, and Orange County can continue to grow into a safer, more equitable community. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Giancarlo Rodriguez, and I live at 10725 Cypress Trail Drive, Orlando, Florida, 32825 in District 4. I'm here with Sunrise Movement Orlando, a youth-led climate organization fighting for issues like sustainability, better transportation, and affordable housing. Right now, Orlando is suffering higher rents, worse traffic, and urban sprawl that destroys rural and natural lands, all while putting us at higher risk of flooding and driving up the price of property insurance. I'm glad that the county is looking into creating a new vision, which could be Vision 2050, because we need change now. We need to take bold action to put Orlando in the right direction, and giving people choices in what type of housing they'd like to live and what type of transportation they'd like to use seems to tackle a lot of these issues. This is why Sunrise Orlando is emphasizing complementing Vision 2050 by eliminating parking mandates within half a mile of transit, a solution that cuts red tape by allowing for developers to decide how much parking they need instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, and allows the building of diverse and affordable infill housing near transit, all while discouraging building on rural and natural lands. In cities like Minneapolis, after eliminating parking minimums, they saw rent go down by about $200 a month. And this is the type of action which we need now, especially for working families who are living paycheck to paycheck. For young people like me who question if we're even going to be able to ever own a house because of how high the prices are going up. We need to start the change right here in Orange County so young people, working families, everyone can afford to live here. We can't keep dragging our feet for change. We have to start building and creating the Orlando we want to see in the future now. If we keep saying Orlando is ready, Orlando is too car dependent, we can't make such a change, then we're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that will only continue the status quo. We hope Vision 2050 can create the Orlando that we need. And that Orlando is walkable, affordable, and seriously prepared for climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. I just saw someone just come up with the Sunrise. You the same message as them? Similar? Okay, I'm going to cut it off at the lady with the love shirt, only because we're almost at that 30 minutes and we're doing pretty good, and so we need to move on with the meeting. All right, next.
Thank you for being here. I will try to keep this as brief as possible. My name is Marcy Federico. I live at 14237 Lake Underhill Road in zip code 32828 in District 4. One of the issues I'm going to bring up, I know Commissioner Cordero is already familiar with. I want to make it very clear. I think that the idea behind 2050 is a very good one. I'm not anti-development. I think it's very important to reduce urban sprawl. I think that's very important. However, I also think it's very important to make sure that all development decisions are made safely for the community and very responsibly. I'm going to give you an example of an issue that we're having in my own neighborhood. I live in Waterford Lakes. Many of you may be familiar with that area. Parts of the neighborhood are already over 40 years old. I've been there for about 20 years. And, you know, there's this random parcel, and a developer wants to come in and increase the density. Sounds good, right? Infill development, decrease urban sprawl. But the issue is there's a significant safety issue at this location. There's 2 schools, there's 1,400 children. There's only a right turn in only situation, so cars are having to make dangerous U-turns. There's been accidents, there's been near misses. So under Vision 2050, you know, I want to make sure that a project like this can't just slide through without regards to the safety of the community. It's very important. And I feel that if we're going to increase the density, let's try to do it closer to the city core where there's more resources, there's more hospitals, there's more infrastructure. Because out where I live, there's no public transportation, there's a bus stop. It's over a mile away from where this project is going to be, or it's about a mile away, and it goes east. It doesn't even go west. So that's all. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marion Price. I live at 554 Lake Avenue, Orlando 32801 in the Lake Cherokee Historic District. So I'm a citizen of District 3 of Orange County and also a citizen of Orlando. And one thing that I'd like to say is that I'd really love it if the county and all of the municipalities would coordinate their efforts toward this plan. I think it's wonderful that you're planning so far ahead for the inevitable growth that is going to happen in our area. And I like that you're inviting citizens to participate. What I'm going to say is mostly just generalities, but they're all important things. First, I think it's important to preserve wetlands, wildlands, rural lands, to build up within the urban area and not outward into sprawling areas with lots of more single-family housing that causes traffic problems and more cars on the road. Everyone has mentioned transportation, and it's so important to have more bus routes and better connections so that people can actually take the bus to where they want to go and not have to use a car. There should be shelters for people waiting for a bus. They shouldn't have to stand in the hot sun, in the rain, no place to sit down. Those should be everywhere. Safe shelters that won't blow over in a hurricane. Okay. Then I want more walkable and bikeable neighborhoods with everything they need right there. Mixed-use planning and development as much as possible. And then lots of affordable housing for the lower income workers. And of course, good impact fees so that the developers pay for the things that are needed for their developments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. They've been really great and will give us a lot to consider. And right now, we're going to move along to the presentations by the work groups. We're going to start with the District 5's work group. We have Tom, I can't remember how to pronounce it, Narit, and Aaron Lewis. So they're going to present some of the research that they've done. You got a microphone right there.
Yep. Thank you so much. You could pass that down to the commissioners, please.
Oh, we got copies.
No, that one's different.
Oh.
What I did today, so again, I know Olin is here. Thank you very much for all of the assistance and work in the process. So I think we're 5 or 6 member committee has been working pretty diligently for the last, I don't know, couple of months. Great input from lots of different players. We basically boiled it down to a single sheet, a couple pages here of 5 points that I'll put forth. But what you saw there today was what I submitted today was our deadline for public substantive input to the staff. So that's what we provided. Okay, thank you, no problem. So in any case, yeah, what we've done, different members of the team, I've just got 5 key points that we would like to suggest as solutions, if you will, for 2050. We're happy to meet on anything else beyond that. But from a higher level perspective, this would be my soapbox, if you will. The biggest problem I have with 2050 is just that nobody, the way we're doing it and the way we're deploying it, which is county-wide, and I think several of the speakers just spoke to it today about liking to see density where density should be, leave the rural, et cetera, et cetera. So we're basically taking a process that's never been done county-wide anywhere in the country. It's been done in 7 counties across the country in a 36-year period of forms-based code being in existence. And so within that, those 7 counties have only done it to specific target areas, not countywide. So that's my soapbox. You can say, well, how do I fix that? But really, that's not my job. If somebody hasn't figured out how to fix it in 36 years, and the very people and the institutions that have created form-based code haven't figured out how to fix it and make it apply countywide in 36 years, you can't rely on this little old salesman, to figure that out. So from a municipality perspective, there's 380 municipalities that have deployed this over that same 36-year window. Out of those 380 municipalities or cities, 1 has done it citywide, and that's the city of Miami. So very, very large, the largest city in the state of Florida has done it citywide. The other 379 across the country, the nation, if you will, have all done it, again, specific to several of the speakers, to the high-density, high-growth target areas, and not the rest of the county. So you can ask, what are the others doing? They're basically doing a mix of today's traditional form of governance, which is what we do today, and then, of course, they do the forms-based code for that small percentage. Again, it's 1% to 1.5% of either a county or a municipality across the country. So the adoption rate is incredibly small. I can't say why that is, don't really care why that is, but I'd like to make sure everybody dots their I's and crosses their T's. So on to what our group has found, basically 5 points with a couple of sub-points. But the first one, I'll just read it verbatim, is, and this has all been submitted to to staff, and so they'll be reviewing that, deciding what they feel is valid, and then passing that to the DPZ sub-consultants, I assume, to then look at how they can fold that into the code, or if they decide not to do that, that's their call. Apply Vision 2050 in Orange Code with the proposed comp plan amendment, rezoning with increased density and expanded uses only to the International Drive sector, UCF sector, and specifically named large greenfield or brownfield areas, targeted growth centers, or prime redevelopment sites. So again, putting it where you want to target your high growth, where you want to target your transportation hubs, and then leave the rest alone. And then after the above, intensification should only occur, again, many folks spoke about this up at the podium, after effectively addressing all the concerns of OCPS, Public Works, traffic, EPD. There's quite a few in regard to school concurrencies. The school's trying to have some teeth that apparently get taken away with Vision 2050 under certain circumstances, and the same with traffic with right-of-way issues. After detailed analysis of the reduced parking requirements and impacts, including input from the fire marshal, because again, I think the folks who are advocating for reduced parking, I don't know that there's any plans in there from a parking perspective other than a couple of things under some of the transit zones. No studies per se or plans. After adding in the missing and long-awaited traffic study, so appropriate strategies and capital improvements can plan and put in place as part of the plan, and then after fixing the inconsistencies that were talked about, and then of course we've got a whole bunch about, there's a lot of, one of our team members used it as word salad, so there's a lot of stuff in there where it's very vague, very inconsistent, and again, that's with our current form of governance. That's when we run into problems, when it's presented to the staff from a developer's perspective, and then to the commissioners where they say, hey, we've got to give the guy what he's asking for because it's a vague statement in the code and we can't lock it down, so we have to give it to him. So today, there's a lot of vague statements. Item 2, address public infrastructure, schools, roads, and utilities. So I brushed on those lightly, but again, we break that down into certain points that have been provided to staff. Item 3, there's a 6-acre rule. If anybody has read that 6-acre rule, it's a part of the streamlined process. And we've had conversations with different commissioners, but we really second Commissioner Uribe's focus on dropping that down to 3 acres as opposed to its current 6, and then we give some detail about that. Item 4, establish neighborhoods, rural communities, and all other areas outside of the above targeted growth areas do not get new 2050 flume or transact rezones. They remain on current code and governing methodology. So again, put it in the high density areas, and then all other areas, traditional form of governments, just as in all of the other, but one city of Miami. And again, to fall back on city of Miami, my soapbox, right? City of Miami has done it jurisdiction-wide, and they've had it for 14 years. And today, its sister county, or its brother county, Dade, does nothing with form-based code. I have no idea why. I just know that their sibling should have proof of success. And then the 5th is very, very important because we've got a lot of issues in several of the districts with PDs or planned developments. So our suggestion there is to add a PD flume to Vision 2050 for existing planned development PDs. And within that, it's going to give them a future land use designation or sector for all existing PDs, not future PDs. Those will go away, as Vision 2050 is claiming for. But again, focused on the high growth district areas only. So again, keep the existing PDs as PDs. Those are negotiated contracts that you, the public, have had input on. Commissioners here and their preceding commissioners have had input on. And it's a contract between the county and those developers. So they have a lot of conditions that are out there that we think should remain. Again, this is our study group. right, suggesting to staff. So we don't want to see them give away higher densities and intensities within Vision 2050. Based on the current staff's efforts, we really want them to respect and look back at contractually what's been agreed to by previous commissions. Any other thoughts, Aaron, that I missed? Or?
I think that covers most of like going through the data points and like the highlighting those solutions. Something that was brought up with the speakers today, I think we kind of came to a realization with this that I had mentioned in the last meeting that we had, is that Vision 2050 is a great idea, but with it being applied just to unincorporated Orange County, it's going to have to be done in such small areas because of the need to focus on those sectors like we mentioned, the International Drive, UCF, and those specifically named greenfields and brownfields. And with that, if we actually want to see Vision 2050 coming to fruition as a successful plan, I do think that it is imperative that we're working with the municipalities throughout the county. That way, the urban development and density that the form-based code is designed to implement is being done in urban areas, in these municipalities, and coming just slightly outside those municipalities into our unincorporated areas that are already on a more urban side of it, and leaving the rural communities and the suburban communities that we see in the unincorporated Orange County on this Euclidean model that we already are using here. Because to try and expand what we have in Baldwin Park into areas like the Bonnieville area and going into the North Tanner area, it's not going to work out there. And so we got to make sure that if we want this to succeed, that we are partnering with the municipalities that we have with inside of ourselves, so we could see a true vision come to fruition. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted real quick to mention in my discussions with them too, one of the issues we found with Vision 2050 is possible displacement of affordable housing, which was very concerning when we had our discussion and realized that, you know, by increasing these densities, we may have issues where it's displacing some of the affordable housing that we currently have and making it more unaffordable. And that came in the discussion we were talking about Baldwin Park and how it's expanding out to areas outside of Baldwin Park surrounding it, which currently has affordable housing. But once they're buying out those properties and increasing the intensities and densities into what we know Baldwin Park is not affordable and into some more of those unaffordable types of properties. Was there any, that's good, right? Okay, so.
There's just one thing I wanted to add as you were talking about the I-Drive and UCF corridors. I don't know if anybody saw the memo from Unite Here. Right now, this is a major issue in my district, and I only worry that it will grow. We have hotels and temporary livings literally in the entrance of residential areas. And sadly, these are not very welcoming in a sense of the kind of activity that goes on. I believe one of our previous commissioners approved years ago, before I was here, it's on Orange Blossom Trail on the entrance of Sky Lake, a hotel, because you know anything under 30 days or 28 days is considered still hotel. And on the Vision 2050, it would be a permitted use. And I think that this is very important that it be classified more as a special exception than a permitted use, because we know, one, unfortunately, historically, it brings more crime. Secondly, it devalues the communities. And thirdly, it tends to happen in communities that are already challenged. And I would like for you all to think about this, and Tina, I hope you'll take note. I mean, we know how it affects our community all over, but if anybody's out there listening, this cannot continue to happen. Right now on McCoy, which is right where it butts up to Belle Isle, but it's still unincorporated Orange County, that city is terrified of this happening because it causes a problem. And you can't just stick hotels, and anything, even extended stays, are considered hotels, right? So we have to get in front of this because we have already seen traditionally that it is not good for communities. And if these are going to be permitted, it'll happen all over the county. Because remember, like you said, it's one rule countywide. So I would like to challenge us to take that on directly and take a position on that. And hopefully staff that is here is taking note of that, because they need to come in front of us if they want to do this. And what we have seen is something I'll never forget. I grew up in my district on OBT, Gold Key Inn. It was amazing back in the 80s, lots of weddings and stuff like that. Now, okay, so while something can start shiny, if there isn't that commitment, like being a chain, it immediately brings down that area. And so I would like to pursue not allowing that to be a permitted use going forward. And there's so many things off our radar. This is the whole point, and so I'm glad you discussed. Tina, we're going to let District 4 go because Commissioner Gomez Cordero has to leave. So, Eric.
I just wanted to say that I had a meeting, I think it was yesterday, with the Vision 2050 staff, Alberto, Alan. We discussed a lot of things, and I want you all to know that they are here right now, and they are taking notes because everything that you said is important. But things that everybody, and including the board, has said before, they had twisted over and tried to accommodate. So like Commissioner Uribe said, it's not for you, it's not for us, it's for all of us, right? So that's why we're working this together. So I have to say that I appreciate you all. But if you see me leaving, I have another meeting. So the night doesn't end yet, but I'm going to leave Eric here.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. I want to thank the commissioners for scheduling this meeting, and then also staff for being here as well, and all their hard work on this, and also the members of the public for being here. I don't have any sort of formalized presentation that Tom had. We've had some meetings. District 4 residents have met a few times and talked about some things, but nothing I think as formalized as Tom's group does in District 5. But just want to discuss a couple things about Vision 2050 and Orange Code. We heard a lot tonight about, in public comment and from comments up here as well, about the deficits that we have in infrastructure and transportation. And which those things absolutely 100% exist. No one can, anyone who drove here in rush hour tonight can probably tell you that those exist. And also with the big rainstorm we had yesterday, I know on the east side of the town, we just got downpoured on. So those things definitely exist. Even though Vision 2050 and Orange Code is about the future, I think it's important to remember the past and how we got here and why those deficits in transportation infrastructure exist. And one of the big reasons is this is a county that's been primarily developed on low-density suburban sprawl, which simply does not pay for itself. That's why we have a $22 billion deficit in roadway projects, because we live in a county that's spread out, that's car-dependent, and that when things are built, and frankly, and I know no one likes to pay taxes, but our taxes do not cover all those infrastructure costs associated with that development, especially for those of us who own our own home, who have a homestead exemption on that home. We're limited on how much our property taxes can increase. So it's important to remember how we got here, and that's kind of the developed patterns that we've gone through this far in the county. And also, especially also on the transportation issue as well. I studied this issue quite a bit in this county, and I feel comfortable saying we will never solve our transportation issues in this county without a dedicated funding source for our transportation system, which we currently do not have. And our community had the opportunity in 2022 to vote for such a multimodal, modern transportation system that is befitting of a modern metropolitan county that we are now and will continue to grow into. And it lost by 16 points. So until we, as a community, decide that we are ready to invest as a community in our transportation system, we are not going to solve those issues. So talking about the increased costs, I believe the commissioner or councilman from Edgewood talked about their increase in their costs going up in the fire. Again, 36%, it's just a lot, and no one can argue that. But again, going back to our past and how we developed and the tax revenue that development has provided has not been sufficient to pay for those costs. And in Vision 2050 and Orange Code, when we're talking about dense, mixed-use development in places where it belongs, is a more tax-efficient way to develop a community. You have more tax revenue per acre in that style of development that can actually pay for those services and that infrastructure that we need. That is a benefit of Vision 2050 and Orange Code. More sustainable development patterns. The representative from the local 737, I appreciate your comments here tonight. I looked over your talking points here that are provided as well, talking about how a lot of the workers live far away from either the hotels they work in or maybe theme parks, whatever those tourist locations are. And the targeted sector where we're driving the majority of this new development under Vision 2050. A lot of it, that targeted sector is near those tourist attractions, right? So we're going to provide more housing options where those workers are living, so they won't hopefully have to travel as far to get to work. So that's a benefit of that for those workers, and it's really important that we give them an affordable place that is close to live to where they're working, so they don't have to commute either by bus, a couple hours, or even by car. I also wanted to talk about a couple things that Tom mentioned. Me and Tom have had some good conversations, and I can look forward to more in the future. And I think we're getting a little scared off just by the term form-based code, and I talked to Tom about this, like what exactly about this form-based code is concerning to you? And I think that we're getting maybe a little bit concerned or maybe caught up in some of the other comments, like we don't want to turn Lake Pickett into Baldwin Park. But no one's trying to do that under Vision 2050 and Orange Code. So I think it's important that we focus on those maps that need to make sure they're accurate and all those things that you mentioned before, Tina, but on what is actually being proposed in these neighborhoods in which we live. And no one is trying to turn East Orange County into Baldwin Park. And Commissioner Bonilla mentioned how unaffordable Baldwin Park is, and absolutely is. But the biggest reason why it's unaffordable is because people want to live there. And because those kind of communities are rare in Orange County, mixed use, bikeable, walkable. That's where people want to live. And they couldn't charge that much to live in Baldwin Park unless people wanted to live there. So the people have decided that those are the communities that are valuable and they want to live in them. If we built more Baldwin Parks in places that we should, not in Lake Pickett, but if we built them in places where we should, maybe they wouldn't be so unaffordable. That's a market supply and demand issue that we're not meeting currently. Adding planned development as a future land use that Tom mentioned. I think it's, and other comments I've heard with people that I've engaged in these meetings with and also in our District 4 meetings, it's important that we just don't look at a future land use and say, well, this future land use allows more density and intensity, therefore I don't want this future land use. Future land use and zoning is Orange Code, they work together. So you can't just look at one or the other. So even though a future land use may allow a specific density or intensity, if you don't have the zoning that would allow that level of density, you can't build it. And even if you have the zoning, there's all these other requirements of Orange Code that, again, if those requirements are not met, you could not build that more intense or intense development. So we have to consider the whole picture, not just pick out future land use or zoning and focus on that. And also PDs as well. 40% of unincorporated Orange County is planned development. And those, especially those that are built out, are not changing under Orange Code. They're already built out. And even the ones that have the opportunities to build, I mean, the conversations I've had with staff and there's people who want to, there's an opt-out, maybe that's what you're referring to. But from what I understand, that opt-out is going to be difficult for a property owner to obtain. And especially on the east side, I live in the Avalon Park area. Most of the things over there are PDs, and they're all built out. Absolutely nothing changes under Vision Code in Orange 2050 for those built-out PDs. So this is really only affecting a small portion of the county. Almost half is almost half. I know your district commissioner, but just talking about the county overall, 40% are PDs. So again, not a huge effect on those PDs. And Tom also mentioned, things that need to be coordinated with, other departments in the county, EPD, transportation planning. And I know this plan's been in the works now for 6-7 years, and I know those conversations, that coordination has happened. I've sat in meetings, plenty of them, with representatives from multiple departments. I can tell you that though planning obviously is working on this plan, they have done it in consultation with those other departments, and planning has not always gotten exactly what they've looked for. So that coordination is happening, and it will continue to happen in the future. And I think it also is important, minute and a half. I didn't think it would take the whole time. It's also important to recognize the choice that we have here. It's not the choice between Vision 2050 and Orange Code and absolutely nothing. It's Vision 2050 Orange Code or our current comprehensive plan. We have a comprehensive plan in place that has gotten us into the places that we are now with unaffordable housing, with a transportation crisis. So if we do not adopt and approve Vision 2050 and Orange Code, we will be stuck with what we have. And what we have had maybe worked at one place in time, but is no longer working for this county. And it's also, if we adopt this plan, it's not set in stone. We can continually update it. It can continue to get better. There are things in it. I don't think it's perfect. I stand with the people, with the members of Sunrise Movement Orlando about the parking minimums. Parking minimums, promote car usage, increase costs for tenants and businesses. Something we need to continue to look at. So this is not a plan that is etched in stone. We can continue to work on it and improve on it. But the first step is approving this and starting there and creating a better system and a better future for Orange County. Thank you.
Eric, I don't know, Commissioner, did you want to say anything?
I have to say that I'm not leaving my community meeting just started, and I will not get on time over there, so I'm going to stay.
Eric, I'm only going to refer to District 3, okay, because that's who I represent, District 3. And first of all, and you're very knowledgeable, but until 2 years ago, there was an AMA that was implemented. Was that in 2008 or 2009? Alternative Mobility Area, which allowed developers to grow and develop. It was during the recession with any accountability to transportation. And we actually couldn't even deny someone based on transportation. I pursued that, and we had that AMA dissolved 2 years ago with the votes of the county commission. And that just tells you how unproductive we are in paying as we go. Because when they created this, I believe it was Mayor Crotty, they never sunsetted it. So what, they think we were going to be in a recession forever? So that started our problem. The other thing I want to say is, I think in District 4, there's a lot of PDs because that's where you've had a lot of growth, and now it's switched over to Horizon West, which are now all PDs. But District 3 is not the same, and Tina's going to have the mic soon. We're the contrary. Where I live, I have 100-foot lots, 75-foot lots. I have a mix. And when you talk about opt-out, most of my residents didn't even know that the county was making these alterations until we had a community meeting, and they would look up their property and say, oh, when did this happen? And so now it's a responsibility of the people who live there to say, I don't want my property rezoned and redistributed. So while there are areas that are more like that, District 3 is one of the oldest. We're Gatlin, Conway, all of these things. I also wanted to just talk about, when you talk about adopting this, once entitlements are given, we can't take them away. So if we adopt this, and there are a lot of problems, and my girl's going to go next, we can't go back to somebody who buys land and take away their entitlements. So while we always hear this is a live document, it actually isn't, because once I give you an entitlement to do certain usage, no one in this county will be able to go back and say, never mind, Eric, you can't do that. So while I understand there's some parts of this that are important to you, I have to digress back because I have an infill district, okay? If I don't have the fire marshal making sure that we have enough capacity to park the people that live somewhere, I have a problem, because then we're going to have a problem of safety. And what happens with safety is, if you drive through my neighborhood and we can take a tour, they park all over, and people's yards all over, because even apartments don't have enough parking for the residents to live there, because we're no longer one family per unit. We're now seeing 2 to 3 families per unit. So I understand where you're going, and I appreciate your progressiveness, because you do want to see a beautiful vision, but District 3 can't become Baldwin Park because we're already built, okay? Also, one of the things we lack, and my resident were here, our infrastructure is debilitating, because guess what? In 1968, when they built Rio Pinar, there was no requirement of retention pond. Even though it's a PD. Same thing happened in Pepper Tree. Same thing happens all in that area. That didn't exist when these neighborhoods were built. My house was built in 1978. There wasn't. My retention pond is Lake Jessamine behind my house because there isn't. So what happened in my community? Flooding. Flooding. Floods when it rains. Forget a hurricane. And so now what they want to do is they want to infill every single piece of it while we already have an infrastructure problem. So what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to damage the homes of the people who live there? So I respectfully disagree that we move this forward. In some areas it could work, and again, I'm going to digress back. You can't do one across the board because just like what we're seeing there, and we have the cities that are also built within my unincorporated Orange County. And guess what? The city of Orlando isn't doing this. So they have a different standard. So now that they have a different standard, we're stuck coming down Orange Avenue start at Holden and come downtown. They have built it up to the sidewalk, so we have nowhere to expand. We don't even have an opportunity to have a dedicated bus lane because we're so dense. So we are stuck in a different predicament that you are. And that's where it worries me, one, across the board. But I am trying to work, and this is where I'm glad that our residents are here and all of you are here. As much as I know about my district, I have already 5 adjustments that I've been able to make with my district. Lake Jessamine, Michigan, Lake Holden, Taft, Azalea Park. All of them are different. All of them, right, Commissioner? So, and that's just a touch because Taft is the oldest area. I mean, I actually have industrial usage with residential on the property. And they can't, guess what? I get complaints. Code enforcement's gone out and cited these residential mobile homes on industrial lots. And guess what? It's an entitlement they had since the 50s. So they can't. And I also have a big gasoline plant that, God help us, if it exploded, there will be no Taft, right? It'll be gone. So again, because we're an older community that existed when all we had was trains coming in. And Commissioner Gomez Cordero knows that area because you had it until 2 years ago. Now it's my area. So that's what scares me about one for all. Okay.
Please, no applause. No, just kidding. You can go ahead and applause. So I did want to say that, when you were mentioning this isn't like Pickett, well, they did want to do villages and hamlets in rural East originally. So, yeah, and that was taken out because, I asked for community meetings to be able to happen, to listen to the people and tell staff, like, this is not what they want. This is not right for the area. And I have to say, through Transmittal, I was definitely, like, super supportive of this. And, Commissioner, you kept saying something that I didn't understand, but staff kept reassuring me that, yes, there's going to be community input, because you kept saying there's no community input's going to be taken away. I did not know what you meant by that. Like, I didn't understand. And that's a problem that we have when the commissioners can't talk to each other. We can't understand each other and what each other's concerns are, which is why these sunshine meetings are so important. Because all we were getting up to that point was what staff was telling us. And staff was reassuring me, yes, there's going to be community input. Well, delving more into that, I found out the community input was everything up to Vision 2050 approval. After that, no more community input because everything was approved with Vision 2050. So that's very concerning, especially that I felt like I was misled also into believing that there would be, when in fact, up to all the community meetings like we're having right now, they considered community input up to the final approval of Vision 2050. That's definitely not our definition of community input when it comes to rezonings or anything like that. Another thing is that, my team here did not. They're very politically correct. I'm not. I'll say it. I also was misled into believing that this had been done in other places. And when they did their research, found out it had not. I mean, they were very subtle, and your presentation stating, well, I say subtle, although it's like the numbers are the numbers, right? Only one place has done this citywide, and that's Miami, out of 300. And for us to be told that, oh, we're doing this countywide, it's been, kind of led that it's been done before. Like if you look at back at the Vision 2050 presentations by Alberto and listing all these places, like some of the places they also found, a couple of them didn't even end up implementing it that were listed in Alberto's presentations, but we were kind of led to believe it was happening. So it was just a lot of that, being misled, really believing that this is something that's been successful in other places, and then stating that, well, it has to happen countywide because then it's going to be difficult to just apply it to certain areas because it'll be confusing for our staff. However, if that's true, then why almost 300 other places have done this in only certain places rather than the whole city or the whole county? So if we do this countywide, we'd be the first ones to actually do this countywide. So the first ones to apply this countywide. Vision 2050 is the form-based countywide. Because if we apply this count, just like Commissioner Uribe just said, that they'll be given entitlements for increased intensities and densities, and we won't be able to take it back if it's a mistake. We won't be able to have community input on any of these that are being implemented and increased. For instance, I believe it's on Rouse Road, right? There's a development there that we had community meetings, and the developer went away because, they just didn't want it there. It wasn't right. The traffic can't, the road can't handle it. But in Vision 2050, it's approved, even though it was denied through community input. So things that were already denied or developers went away because the community didn't want it are now ending up in Vision 2050 and being approved in 2050. So that's a concern. But the reason why the project started was to preserve neighborhoods from the people who are coming, and ended up turning around into let's serve the people who are coming, disregarding the people who are already here. So go ahead, clap, you're allowed. Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, so affordable housing, all the talks about affordable housing is not addressed in Vision 2050 either. Transportation is not addressed in Vision 2050. Like all those things that the biggest concerns that we have is not being addressed in 2050, which is why, I keep saying we need a transportation plan in Vision 2050. We need to account for that mass transit system that we want. We need it planned for in Vision 2050. Affordable housing, we're doing a study right now in my office on how many units we need for different AMIs, like affordable homeless shelters, whatever. I'm hoping that data could help us on looking at Vision 2050 and saying, like, really, what do we need? Because that's not addressed in here at all. The only thing that's addressed is the number of people who are coming, which through some research on my staff too, have found out that some of the numbers, are used, the methodology is used differently and through different numbers in Vision 2050. If you're going to do something, you're going to use statistics and numbers, the methodology that you're using for numbers should be consistent across the board. Not in one case you're using the lowest estimate, in another case you're using the highest estimate. It has to be consistent, and it's not. So there's definitely a lot of issues. Another concern that I found from my work group here is that, the examples of the consultant too, like they have never done something like this, but yet they were asking to implement things in our county that they hadn't done someplace else, that hasn't been successful. There isn't anything shown that this county-wide has been successful anywhere else. This is untested. There are things that they were presenting that just hasn't been done before. We're not, what's the word for, we're not a guinea pig. Orange County's not the guinea pig. We shouldn't, we need something that's has been shown to be successful. Miami, their 30-year plan is becoming a 10 to 15-year plan because they're already seeing it hasn't been successful, and they're redoing it now. So that hasn't been successful. So before I take up too much time, I'm going to pass it over to Tina.
But one last thing, and my council member here, infrastructure and transportation are not addressed here. They're not. Yeah, what's that? Or public safety, yeah.
Or the schools. We have someone here from the school board who I would like to hear from as well with some of their concerns. Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Again, this is a problem we have now. These entitlements exist, and we can't come back from it. I had an apartment complex that was horrid for me 3 years ago that affected the city of Edgewood, affected the Pine Castle area, but those entitlements had been given in 1971. And the community didn't understand how I could not take away an entitlement that already existed on a property that they bought. So we're going to let Tina, you ready?
Oh, sure. So I'm a city planner. I kind of grew up doing this, and that's what I do. I actually work for developers, so I'm the big bag developer over here. But I live in a neighborhood. I live in a beautiful downtown neighborhood. And so we have a kind of joke around. Tom and I have gotten to be friends through this process. And we have plenty of folks that speak for the trees, and I'm speaking for the E's, which is the established district. We're kind of a unique scenario because we're this almost city of Orlando, downtown. Like, you can go out on our lake and you can see the downtown buildings, but we're on septic, less than 3 miles from downtown Orlando. And majority of these areas in District 3 are still on septic. And, so I'm just concerned, I think that the Vision 2050 Orange Code, the intensification in targeted areas, I think it's important. I think we should be targeting our TOD zones and being, specific. And we even have an intended zone in here that's for some of the areas that the county's identified and have been in the county's areas identified for intensification. But I think that because this drug on for a while and then all of a sudden it got wheels and it started moving so fast, I think there's areas, and I've actually found a lake in every district that in District 2, in District 5, in District 4, that's just like Lake Holden, that is a really unique scenario, big, large lot, 85-foot lots. And, those $800 to $1 million homes, they're paying their fair share. They're paying their fair share plus some. And, I just don't think that for the specific targeted areas that are on septic, they shouldn't be intensified. There should be no intensification of uses if a property is still in septic. If there's a plan in place for, all the infrastructure to be there, great. But, and I'm talking about literally downtown core. There are plenty of places where there are green fields and brown fields and targeted areas that definitely need intensification. I can look at that map and click on something and it'll say, oh, highest it can go is a duplex. I'm like, that'd be a great townhouse site, and those aren't in there. But I've also found a lot of areas, like there's a neighborhood, it's called Porter Place, and it's between Peel and Bumby area. It's a gated neighborhood. And the new Orange Code in Vision 2050 have put it as a suburban mixed neighborhood. This is gated. And then they've divvied up half of it to be T42, and then half of it to be T32. But there's a gate and wall. It's kind of like, that's not going to change. So I feel like there should be a little bit more intentful look at some of our core areas where we have nice neighborhoods and established places that I feel are paying their taxes well enough. I'll keep paying my taxes. My taxes are going to go up. They will continue to go up because we have a beautiful property on a lake. But I think there just needs to be a little bit more intentful look at these places. And, thank goodness Commissioner Uribe has, been speaking up. And, the original meetings way back, I was like, but we're on septic, and, I think some of these people, everybody's got urban services everywhere. You live in downtown Orlando. How could we be in the middle of downtown and not have that? So I just would like to see a little more intentful look at specific neighborhoods and not just do this, oh, it's R1, so, R1 and R1 and AA, 85 and 75 lots, okay, we're just going to make them 75-foot wide lots, but it's going to be 12 dwelling units an acre. Well, you're going to get smaller lots at 12 dwelling units an acre, or you could. You know, and that R1, which was originally 50-foot lots, is going to go in some places down to single-family 45-foot wide lots at 6 dwelling units an acre. And I've kind of done a correlation of some of these, like how it's going to change, which it might be appropriate, but not if the urban services and the utilities aren't there. So, you know, and I'm just talking about some core areas downtown, because there's so many places when I'm out there clicking on these maps, they're like, oh, that'd be a great site. It's big enough. You know, there's not something right next to it where you know, you're going to be impacting the neighbors. I just think I think a little more thoughtful, you know, intention. And then because I'm a planner, I dug into some of the uses. I'm a little concerned about some of the uses. I have no idea why food trucks, temporary retail, tent vendors are going to be allowed in a single-family residential neighborhood. I'm sure Olin's going to pull me aside and straighten me out, because he always does that, and I appreciate that. So, but there's just some things. And then up until recently, vacation rentals and short-term rentals were going to be allowed in every single-family residential neighborhood. And what's kind of cool about Orange County is when the legislature passed rules that said that we couldn't, you can't change rules on short-term rentals, Orange County already had laws in place, and we say, put your short-term rentals where short-term rentals go, in the tourist district. So we're one of the few municipalities in the state of Florida that's actually protected from that. And our code enforcement today doesn't do a really good job of enforcing VRBOs. We have so many complaints. I know in the city of Edgewood, I know Commissioner Uribe's had that too, and they can't enforce them, so then they're going to allow them everywhere, and then still not be able to enforce them. It appears that it's taken off the click map, but it was still in the code that was out there. So I'm like, there's just so many things that we don't know. Is it in? Is it out? So some of those things. So I've dug into the uses, and again, speaking for the established neighborhoods, that I think we have beautiful neighborhoods. We have neighborhoods with huge trees, and I think those should be protected as well as some of the rural areas as well. So that's kind of why I'm here and why I've been squeaking a little bit. And, you know, if services and utilities and infrastructure are in place, then, you know, there is an appropriate place for that. And I appreciate the work and effort that's gone into this, but let's dig in a little closer in some of these neighborhoods. So.
Thank you, Tina. And I do want to also acknowledge the staff, the planning division. They have been trying to work with us on some of these things. And something that I just brought up, Tina, is we have a lot of MSBUs because we have a lot of Great Lakes. So something different in District 3, like Conway, like Jessamine, like Mary Jess, like Holden. We have a lot of lakefront communities like Tina just described. And it's different size lots. One on my lake in the front, and across the lake from me is the city of Orlando. To the left of me is the city of Edgewood. And then to the right of me is unincorporated Orange County. And it's very inconsistent. And different lot sizes. My lot sizes are very different from the PD that exists already across the lake. So, but what we haven't talked about is guess where all the water runs off to? Our lakes. So now we're talking about the quality of our lakes, which, by the way, all those MSBUs, me included, and I'm sure you too, we pay for the quality of the water. But yeah, we're going to densify and start damaging. We just did a lake cleanup in Lake Holden. And the biggest thing we found in the lake, because across the street is One Blood, were hand gloves for when they do blood, get your laps. Because we can't understand why, but that's what we found in the lake. So now, you know, this is what we're talking about. You can't have one thing for everything. And while I appreciate your endeavor of doing this mixed use, you've got to be careful of where you do it. Well, now actually we're getting an established area because they're, like she said, well, they were originally when this came out, when we needed public comment, right, Tina? We were at a meeting where Tina got into a confrontation because, let's be honest, when we had these meetings and many of you attended, they didn't say, let's sit down and talk about it. They said, look what we've done, right? They didn't say, what's your opinion? Tell me about your needs. They said, look what we've done for your community. And that's how it was presented. So it was not a forum of, matter of fact, when we had our meetings, and we've had more than one, the staff just talked the entire time. And then they said, oh no, we have to leave. That's all we have in this facility. So I'm going to, again, But what you're seeing on these changes on the lake, and now I've included Lake Mary Jess, wasn't included originally. I've been working on it. Well, we're still working on it, you know? But once we pass this, and somebody decides to buy one lot that can have more than 1 unit per acre, 6 units per acre, how can I tell them, no, you can't? You can't. You can't do that after you've given that entitlement. Okay, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you.
So I'm Lori Forster, I'm in District 1, and I did not have a really pretty formal presentation. Plus, I did not know I was doing that until, they were like, and until Emily said, oh, and we're volunteering you. But I know enough about what's going on there, and one of the biggest issues that we do have in District 1, which encompasses Horizon West, is the fact that Horizon West actually had its entitlements and everything pretty much set in the late 1990s. And so as the entitlements exist, for an example, the folks will come in who are buying these parcels, and they will go in for a flume change or a zoning change or whatever, and they will be given that change, and yet there's no community input. For one example, the Horizon Hamlin Middle School and Elementary School, the kids that walk to school will now be walking past an ABC liquor store, and they will be walking past a Wawa. And if you've ever been to a Wawa, you're taking your life in your own hands by trying to walk on the sidewalk past it, which is pretty terrifying for the people that are in Wincy Groves and Hamlin Gardens and things like that. So, the reality is that as these folks in Horizon West come and ask for these changes and things, there was one subdivision, or PD, I guess, and there were 19 acres that were, so they had single-family homes, and then there was 19 acres that was supposed to be commercial. They came in, they turned around, and they said they wanted high-density apartments. So then a guy right down the street came in, and because I attend a lot of county meetings, and he wanted to do the same thing. He wanted to take his commercial, and he wanted to turn that into high-density apartments. But what happens is when the staff does the reports, they don't tell you, they don't give you a cumulative of the changes that have already been made. And we don't get a cumulative about the projects that may have been approved 8 or 10 years ago. So we're always in a lurch as far as, having the land use and zoning changes, because they're not counting those projects that might have been approved 10 years ago and not built. And I know that is, what's that place on Hunter's, it's on the South Trail. Maybe it is Hunter's Creek. Yeah, it is Hunter's Creek. Okay. And they are having some issues because there are a couple of large parcels that were approved like 10 years ago or so for more high density, but yet those aren't being, counted in on when somebody comes and wants something different. And so that is a problem. And it becomes a problem because then it becomes a major traffic problem. We have no mass transit out on the west side of the county. And so you turn around and you say to yourself, the roads are horrible. And I keep saying, and I know anybody who is in transportation is sick of me, I don't care. But when Mayor Demings was asking for the sales tax for the transportation, and, there's loopholes around applicants not paying their fair share for roads. But I said, why can't we just demand that they have to put in a right-hand turn lane and a left-hand turn lane? Because I do a lot of observation when I drive or anything I do. And when you start, if you're on a 2-lane road and you start stacking up because somebody can't make a right-hand turn because somebody's in the crosswalk, that's a problem. That starts backing traffic up. So get them out of the lane of, we should be focusing on getting people out of the lane of traffic all the time. I mean, we've come and sat down and came up with some what we think are relatively simple solutions to some of the traffic problems that would not be our cost. It would be the developer's cost. That would be part of what you had to do. If you're on a 2-lane road, you have to have right and left-hand turn lanes. If you're on a 4-lane road, you have to have right and left-hand turn lanes. I don't care if you're on a 1-lane road, you need right and left-hand turn lanes. But that's not been addressed in here anywhere, and it is a problem. And the other thing too is, and I have talked to, and I will say, that, Olin, thank you, because every time I have a question or I need anything, you are very responsive to me. I also have the interactive map, and I think one of the problems that we're having is the fact that depending on where you live, and I end up being in a very rural area, I understand what is permitted, but then there's all these things that are special exceptions or permitted with additional standards or allowed to have a permitted with a special exception with additional standards, permitted with additional standards, et cetera. So if you turn around and you look at some of these things, it really is kind of scary because permitted with additional standard is borrow pits and excavation and fill, firewood sale or storage, heavy industrial, medical marijuana medical marijuana, yeah. Well, in our neighborhood, we're all rural, so that's probably gonna happen. But you know, it's like solid waste. It's like, you know, hazardous waste treatment, storage and disposal facilities that are going to be allowed if they meet certain, you know, additional standards. So I've gone through so many of the interactive maps, and I'm just sitting here saying to myself, at what point are we and the rest of the community going to have to fight? Because do you want to have to fight against, you know, hazardous waste treatment, storage, and disposal facility? Do you want to go to a meeting and have to say that is not appropriate here? So the fact that it ends up on these interactive maps means somebody is allowed to walk into the county, they're allowed to put their application in, and then the county has to go through the process. So although I appreciate that, some of these things should not be on the interactive map. They shouldn't be on somebody's parcel, that these are allowable things that you can do. And I mean, it's overwhelming, and this is just my property. I got pages of all that. And you know, you're right, when somebody went into the interactive map and looked, it is very overwhelming. So again, it's like, how much fighting does everybody in the county want to do? Because if you look at your use, you know, if you drill down into the, you know, additional uses and you start seeing, you know, all these other kind of things that are just not appropriate in a residential area, then you're saying to yourself, well, I guess I have to fight. And that lady back there, I don't remember what your name is, but I was at the P&Z and BCC on your issue on that lot that was on the corner, and I thought, she is absolutely right. There's no transportation. It was a old assisted living or something like that. Yeah. 707. Yeah. And although I appreciate that, the reality is when you got to stop and you've got to look and take that whole thing into account. But yet, if it's on here, then somebody can walk up and put in an application because they can drill down into all of these. So this is one of our biggest issues, besides transportation, is this, is the interactive map. And when you drill down, if it's permitted, it's permitted. But all this other stuff, you know, it should go. And again, the thing that also concerned me when I was looking, and I read every page of, and here it is. This is I had to put it in two big binders. But there are too many places in the Orange Code where I just wrote the letter CLAR because I was like, what does that mean? The clarification isn't there. It is so broad and all-encompassing that you could interpret it 100 different ways, which is a problem, because then, depending on who you get as either your planner or your zoning person, they can determine basically what they want. And for it to say that for rezoning, if you have 20 acres or less, you don't need a community meeting, do you know what you can put on 20 acres? Besides my house? Yes. So, yeah. So, So it's like, why are they not required? I think community meetings should be required when you're doing something like that, if there's going to be a major change that has anything to do with future land use or future land use or zoning. And then the last thing I had was, honestly, you guys, every time I heard everybody that was talking, and even everybody up here, and I'm going to give a plug for the rural boundary, The rural boundary, which is what we are hoping at some point that the BCC will approve to put on the ballot, will help with, in my opinion, it will help to have that developer have that additional standard to make sure that they have really looked at that and said, is this before I put my application in, is this an appropriate place to put this particular development? Because the scrutiny from the BCC, you will have a higher standard in order to get approved with the rural boundary. And, but anyway, so I think the rural boundary would help with all of this to begin with, but I'd really like to see the interactive maps get rid of stuff that is completely inappropriate.
One of the things that's going on, and I'm going to put on a little bit of the developer hat, is when they do the comp plan amendment and the rezone, it will give when they do the comp plan amendment to implement Vision 2050, that's where the density intensity will be established, and it'll be done all in one thing, click, it's done. And then they'll do the Vision 2050, and then they'll establish the different sectors. Well, if they don't handle the schools the schools with part of that, like as a developer, I would have to come in, I would have to be negotiating with those guys. Christopher Mills would be saying, give me some money up front, and they'd run us through the ringer, and we'd be making sure all those, at least the impact fees were paid early so the schools could start planning. What's going to happen with this, with the 478,000 students, or 470-something thousand people, 70,000 something students, 26 something new schools, is all the little infill development that we're going to see in the smaller areas, which is good, like where you could see some of that aesthetic coming in, but all of those are going to be de minimis. So they're going to tick, 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 tick. Well, who's it going to get? It's going to come get, I mean, I know you're okay with this, but, the developers are going to have to carry that burden that should have been handled at the zoning. So, definitely getting the school district to the table, and, making sure that we're giving them proper time and instruments to be able to plan for the schools that we're going to need in the areas where we're densifying, intensifying. I think it is important because it's that de minimis, and it's going to go de minimis, de minimis. It's going to be de minimis on transportation. It's going to be de minimis on schools. It's going to be de minimis on these things because they're going to come in little piece at a time, and then all of a sudden it's going to be a burden on the schools and more of a burden on our road. So it's kind of just, I think, again, I want to say, like, be a little more thoughtful in it, and staff is doing a great job. I mean, they're so available and helpful, so definitely appreciate that. But it's I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you.
So pass it back down.
Yeah.
I just wanted to correct something I had said earlier. So we did find another county-wide place. My staff had just let me know. They found it this morning going through all of these. Beaufort, South Carolina. Beaufort. Beaufort. Okay. Well, it depends on what accent you have. It is a city, and it's a county and a city, so it's kind of like Jacksonville. But it's very small, and it does it right where if you look at them, the high density is very concentrated in the center, and then the rest of it's all rural. And so from what do you want to comment on this? Yeah, how about you just explain this?
Hello. Okay, thanks. So we found Beaufort, South Carolina, which is a city. It's the county chair, but it's also a county. It's where Hilton Head Island is. And Beaufort, South Carolina implemented back in 2010 a 10-year form-based code comprehensive plan for the entire county. What makes them unique is they are the only one to do this and as a county-wide, but they also worked with the municipalities, two of the big municipalities within the county, to develop their comprehensive plan in conjunction with the cities. Because essentially, the idea behind this, right, is where, and I'll use Edgewater here because I talked to you, Edgewood, sorry, because I just spoke with you. Where Edgewood ends and unincorporated Orange County begins is not a real boundary, right? It's just a line on a map. So the idea behind this was to get the two municipalities and the county together to make sure that the transition is smooth, right? To make sure the services go well, the transportation is accounted for. So Beaufort just renewed their form-based code for a 20-year comprehensive plan called Beaufort 2040. Makes sense. And in Beaufort 2040, they've actually taken kind of a step further where they've really reached out to protect the rural areas. And they've left some rural areas under the old Euclidean-based code. And some of the rural area is now in a special designated district within the form-based code that protects it from, development and from other things that could impact it. So this is actually kind of getting at both of these kinds of things. It's a success story in a way because they've managed to do this and protect the low country in South Carolina, but at the same time they've developed, this high-density urban area in the city of Beaufort. Now, I just want to say, before I give the mic back and not speak again, the big caveat here, of course, is you can't make a one-to-one comparison. Beaufort City is a city of 20,000 people. So, we're dealing with a city of hundreds of thousands of people. So that's one thing, there's never going to be a perfect one-to-one comparison. But as far as like an area, a county that has done it, and the only county that's done it, they've had apparently moderate success because they've renewed it for a longer period, but they've also worked really hard. And one of the last things I forgot to mention is they do constant revisions. They are always going back and amending it over this time period as problems crop up. And again, so I think that there is an example to look at. How well it fits for Orange County is, of course, up to the board and all that. Thank you.
Can I ask Nicholas, though? So you said they did jurisdiction-wide, but then you said for 2040, you said for 2040, then for 2040, the rural was under Euclidean. So
some rural.
So then they did do it jurisdiction-wide, or they did not?
They implemented. So the city of Beaufort implemented it not citywide. They kept some of the city of Beaufort rural area Euclidean.
So they did both?
They did both.
So
it is possible to do both.
So they didn't do it jurisdiction-wide?
Well, they did it.
FBC, forms-based code.
Okay,
Well,
they did. The county didn't do it jurisdiction-wide. There was areas that were exempted, but they have come back now and kind of, again, put some of those areas into these special districts that we see in the form-based code.
Right.
So they're special protected rural areas that can't be touched and are preserved.
Thank you.
A graphic for Beaufort, South Carolina, compared to Orange County would be very helpful to compare, to talk about this. For 20,000, I'm looking at my map. It's not even comparison. Thank you.
No, absolutely, but this is just for the commissioner and talking about how other counties have done it. We have one county, and it's Beaufort, and it's tiny. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to take a minute to respond to the public flogging. I saved for the last 45 minutes. And just to be clear for people in the audience, because we're throwing around words like form-based code and Euclidean. Euclidean is kind of what we had traditionally. It's your segregated land uses. Your residential goes over here. Your commercial goes over there. It's a segregated land uses. And I think one of the things that's getting confused is just because we have a form-based code we're moving towards that does not mean we no longer have anything that could be considered Euclidean zoning. There is not proposed in this to be mixed use all over the county. Like in the east side, the places that are residential and are staying residential, only the places where you would expect to find mixed use that, State Route 50, your Alafaya trails, that is where we are seeing the mixed uses and the place that you would expect to see the businesses. So you're not going to have big box stores coming into your suburban, neighborhoods and building. So I think we need to be clear about when we distinguish between form-based and Euclidean, what are we actually talking about? What are we actually worried about? And it sounds like there is just so much, a lot of fear about the future. And I come from people wanting to move here. That is a good thing. That means people want to live in this community. Places where people don't want to let people leave, those are places that are dying. So that I see the growth opportunities as a good thing. People want to come and live in Orange County, and it's something we should celebrate. And I can't speak to how this has initially been presented in terms of what the zoning was in your district, Commissioner Uribe, around those lakes, and if they were told this is what happened, but I do know they are making changes. They have been responsive to people's concerns. They are not sticking to their guns, and they are moving things. I think that's important to recognize that the staff has moved in that way. And though it's important that we target most of that growth into the targeted sector and for high densities, we can't discount, when we're talking about affordability, the need for missing middle housing. Duplexes, townhomes, things that they are more affordable than the detached we build two things in this county primarily right now: detached single family homes and apartments. We don't build many townhomes. We definitely don't build any duplexes. And those are, yeah. Well, I mean, currently we don't, I mean, compared to how many thousands of apartments we've approved, I don't think 100 duplexes is necessarily comparison.
Are you almost done?
I am almost done. Sorry, Commissioner. I just want to respond. So, missing middle housing opportunities throughout the county on our, again, not in established neighborhoods, but on thoroughfares like Dean Road, townhomes, Rouse Road. These are not residential streets like 25 miles an hour. They are thoroughfares in our community. Thank you, Commissioner. Sorry.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so Commissioner, we would like to hear from the staff, and we have Alberto Vargas here and John Weiss, if they want to come, if they want to.
Actually, I want to hear from the school board.
Where's the school board? Oh, hi.
We got a hot seat for you right here.
I've seen that movie. I'll sit just because I'm sitting next to you doesn't mean I get flogged too.
You're not on my team. I get it.
All right. So, is there anything you'd like me specifically to address, or just kind of go through?
Just the same thing that everyone has been doing, concerns about, related to schools
Right,
and the
so-
Vision 2050.
Just a couple of caveats up front. I am not a land planner. Tina mentioned my awesome land planner, but he is at home and not feeling well, and I said, please do not bring whatever you have down here and infect me and everyone else. So I will wing it through this the best I can. So, of course, I'm just a staff member. The school board has not held a work session on this. There was one that was canceled recently, trying to get our heads around this data. I mean, this hasn't been done before, right? So this data has proven very difficult and elusive to try to give an answer. So we're kind of, as far as the data goes, we're kind of building the plane as we're flying it, trying to figure it out. I mean, so we at the school board track every single entitlement. We can tell you down to every single kid and every single dwelling unit in this county. So our traditional model has been that suburban model. Somebody comes in for a land use amendment. Tina's people come in, we stick our foot in the door and we say, that's great, it's great that you want to put 2,500 homes, that's up to the county commission to decide, but if you do, we need a middle school site, we need an elementary site, we need a high school site, whatever it may be. So that's kind of the model. We know how to build schools, right? This county has built, the school board has built more schools than all the other counties in Florida combined over the last 20 years. Not even close. I mean, if you see the bar graph, it's through the roof. But what we need is a place to do it and money to do it. So we've been working very closely with staff for the past year or so, and I do want to commend the staff, and now county management is involved, county administrator's office, and they have been great trying to help us wrap our head around this data and how to, kind of make sure we have something. So from the school board perspective, the biggest concern is what's been talked about a lot today, is the instant upfluming and upzoning of all the property. So we take away that ability. As of right now, that will take away the ability to put the foot in the door and say, no, iDrive is the one that keeps me up every night thinking about it. Sunshine is over capacity. Tangelo, with all the development there, will be over capacity. And you keep moving out and out and out. So once we wrap our head around the data, we'll have a better idea, but, we're looking somewhere in the neighborhood of we're at the worst case scenario, 5 or 6 schools in iDrive alone needed. So what is needed is a mechanism to address those school capacity issues. So they've been up flume, they've been up zone. Like you said, you can't take it away. How do we get a school there if they don't want to provide the school? I mean, we've talked about walkability tonight. What discourages walkability is busing kids 5 miles to another school because that school is so overcrowded. And is it really fair to those families in that community to have to be bused, or should the new growth be bused? The workers here talking about, is there going to be housing on iDrive and things like that? To have their kids bused far away is counterproductive. So what we need, we've been working with staff, and staff is strongly committed to fixing this issue before it comes before the county commission, is that there's some way to bring the developers to the table to discuss, regardless of the size. I mean, if I drive up to 150 units per acre for affordable, I believe it's 70 or so. They'll correct me if I'm wrong on that if it's not affordable, but I think that's what 7 or 8 stories worth of, at a minimum, up to 14 or 15 stories of development. Those kids need them, and we can get creative. I mean, there's Brickell in Miami is an example of schools that were incorporated into these developments, so the kids can live there and go to school. And I've always said that we cannot stop the kids. We cannot stop the parents from putting their kids in minivans and driving to school. But if you make it easier, it's just like everybody said, if it's easier, it will happen more. It's never going to happen completely. Trust me, in my neighborhood, some friends of ours, they minivan the kid every day, and the school's like right there. I'm like, my kid can ride a bike, get on the bike, go. Right. So, let's see.
Well, multi-use sidewalks includes the bikes and pedestrians.
So it's really that ability to mitigate those capacity issues. Another thing in the future that I think will be coming, we're getting close to the time for school impact fees. So the future impact, I mean, we've seen cost increases of around 40% in construction. Elementary we're going to complete in a few days is almost double the cost of one from 2018. I mean, it's just a fact of life. We've seen a slight leveling, but I think it's probably here to stay. So those impact fees need to be in line. And I know the legislature has hampered the county commission on impact fees every which way, we turn. And is there a chance, I mean, we're gonna have to do the legal research on it, but for impact fee premiums in targeted sectors? I mean, I've heard quotes of $3 million an acre. We can't afford that. You can't buy land for a school at $3 million an acre. So is there some sort of premium in those areas? If people are going to put the housing development and the kids need to be there, I always say, if a charter school or a private school closes on Monday, those kids, we have to have a chair for them on Tuesday. There's no option. You can't say, I'm sorry it closed, come back next year. It's move the chairs in, right? So, and as I want to, just emphasize, we've been working closely with staff, and we appreciate their cooperation. And the school board will that's not my decision, and I don't speak for the school board, so I think they're going to have a work session soon to try to come up with some recommendations to give to the county commission for consideration. So if everybody keep an eye out for that on the socials or ocps.net on the front page. The calendar's updated pretty much daily.
So I wanted to ask a question because during our conversations too, we were looking at what does this form-based code do to values of an area, and I think we found that it did increase the values, right? Because of course it make it more dense, so you're increasing the values of those areas. So then we were talking about how, well, of course it's going to make it more unaffordable for just housing, but it's also going to make it more unaffordable. We discussed a school to be able to buy property for a school. Can you speak to that? Do you have any concerns about that? Or like how are you going to get the money? I don't know. Money.
I don't know. So impact fees, development does not pay for itself, at least at this current time. Using the current model, we've not done any research how that'll be impacted by the future, but as of right now, people a lot smarter than me that do math a lot better say that it only accounts for like 78% of new school construction and land costs. So yeah, anytime property goes up, that's always going to be an issue, but it's, you know, with or without Orange Code, it has gone up. So, I mean, some places it's doubled or tripled. And some of those sites are reserved, much to the chagrin of developers. They're not getting the impact fee credits that, you know, based on the increased value because they've been locked in for so long. But, you know, the PDs, most of the PDs in the county are entitled. Where they've been entitled, we have school sites if we need them. They're reserved. They may still be owned by the owner, but they only can be used for schools. And when we need them, they get transferred, or maybe they get transferred ahead of time at closeout, and we reserve them for schools. So it's, just to talk, there's a little bit about infill, and there are, of course, you know, county staff's brought this up, and we will acknowledge there are some areas where schools are below capacity. So infill may be useful if it's, of course, done properly, but from just the school perspective, if you have 200 seats in a school and an old shopping center is torn down and apartments put up, you know, if it meets all those other criteria from the school, you know, perspective, having kids in those seats is a good thing. It allows us to spread out, you know, the kids, and it also, schools are funded based on kids in seats from the state. So those schools that have less kids, it's a drain on the general fund, money we use to pay teachers and things of that nature. So some of that may be a good thing. It's just making sure that if there isn't room, that we have a situation. If somebody tears down the entire Florida Mall and puts up, I don't even know how many apartments you could fit on that, we would need a school site. Maybe even 2 or 3.
You had said one time, I think it was Teresa, that in the more dense areas that typically the school's population is smaller. So that was something that potentially when they look at this.
The school capacity.
School generation rate is typically lower when you have the urban downtown areas. So that kind of hopefully will help in some of the urban core as well.
I mean, yeah, we base the generation on housing type. So, I mean, single family is broken down even further this last time the Board of County Commission approved, trying to make it more fair that we saw certain size of house produce an inordinate amount of kids. So why, if you're building an 1,800 square foot home and it generates a lot lower rate than another home, why should you pay that higher when it's built? But you know, that's another, you know, I could talk forever, but that's another issue about the high-rise model. It's, you know, if you look around Lake Eola, I think last year there was literally one kid in all those high-rises. But the one right across the street that's, might have. But if you look at right behind the Ronald Blocker Educational Leadership Center, it's not a high-rise by definition, but it has 3-bedroom affordable apartments, and it's the highest generation rate in the entire county.
Wow.
So it's to be seen. That's one big thing we need to look at and protect, is to make sure that if a high-rise is put up and if people do adopt that model in the future. Right now, we're still people want that suburban, you know, living for their kids. But if they do move into those urban models, that they're not paying the extremely low, you know, right now it's like $300 impact fee per unit per high-rise. That doesn't buy anything.
Thank you for all of that, and you only solidified what we had been thinking, which was the school aspect of this in the Vision 2050, and we're glad you're going to have a workshop to kind of take that in, because that's never been included in what we're doing, and this is exactly our point. Not to flog Eric or you, but it is important when we're making these decisions, so thank you for that. I think we want to ask if there's any county staff. I feel like they're saying, Umberto, do you want to say anything? I mean, we don't want to put you in a compromising position, because let's all be realistic. It's almost 9:00, and so and while I appreciate the donuts going around, I want to, John Weiss, Umberto, anybody want to add any comment? Alberto in the back. Let's limit your comments to 1 minute. No, I'm just kidding.
Sure.
Please keep your comments focused on the concerns that we mentioned.
Just for commissioners, obviously, thank you for the opportunity on behalf of Orange County staff to address the group this evening, and thank you for hosting the event. I'm John Weiss. I'm Deputy County Administrator. I've been involved in the planning efforts for Vision 2050 for quite a while. A lot of what we heard tonight was not new. A lot of the comments, again, from the public, from you all, were items that we have heard, we've attempted to continue to work on and respond to. So let me just address a couple points. And they're brief in terms of my notes. So our current comprehensive plan was adopted in 1991. So almost over 30 years ago at this point. It has a 2030 planning horizon, 6 years away. So that plan has been amended probably thousands of times since its initial adoption, and probably hundreds of times in the last 10 years. So is it predictable? Is it long range? Well, certainly not at this point. And so Vision 2050, fundamentally, we know people are going to continue to move the community well past 2030. And so Vision 2050 is an organizing framework for that growth. And so as we looked at putting the plan framework together, it was intended to ultimately direct most of the growth to the urban areas. We've heard it referred to as the targeted areas. We've attempted to protect the rural areas. We've attempted to protect the environment. We've attempted to protect the established neighborhoods. We may need to be clear about how not just Vision 2050, but Orange Code looks to accomplish that. There's been some discussion about PDs. Well, PDs were expressly exempted from the impacts of Vision 2050. And so if a PD wants to, if land within a PD wants to do something different, that's a public hearing process. So the community gets engaged, the Board of County Commissioners has an opportunity to review that, OCPS has an opportunity to review that. And so there's also been some discussion about the mapping, and 100% agree. The mapping is critical to get right to the success of the plan. So, whether it's the commissioners, certainly staff, the public, take an opportunity to provide feedback on those maps, because those maps we want to get right, we want to present to the board, and ultimately for the board's consideration, it's important to get that aspect right. Schools, transportation, environment. I think coming out of the transmittal hearings where we got good feedback from the commissioners, even, in last September, schools, transportation, and environment were certainly issues that we knew we had to tackle. We've long promised a third work session to expressly address those issues. We've been working very closely with Orange County Public Schools. Again, it's not just a new framework and some new terminology, but the data has been hard to sort of really start to understand and get to kind of work our heads around. And so working very closely with Orange County Public Schools, and some of what you heard tonight about the importance of, as soon as a certificate of occupancy gets issued, and they've got to have the ability to put a kid in the seat. And so we get that, for Orange County Public Schools, they have to be able to see that growth coming and have some ability to react and plan for it. For transportation, working with Transportation Planning Division, they have worked on not just a policy framework, but also run the models and looked at bringing forward an updated 2050 LRTP, Long Range Transportation Plan, to be brought forward commensurate with that. And we're planning on presenting that to the board as well. And of course, on the environment, the board's been absolutely leading on regulatory protections and, technical studies and did sound like it went out.
All right.
I'm almost done, I promise so.
One of my staff bring this to the media room, try to get a new battery.
Can you hear me? Yep, there you go. Okay. So again, in terms of from a staff effort, it's been all hands on deck since transmittal of last year. EPD, zoning, public works, whether it's transportation planning, definitely the coordination with OCPS is really getting involved, at making sure that we understand it, and we're looking at policy amendments and framework, a lot of the funding, challenges that Jad had mentioned, whether it's impact fees, school siting provisions, those are all on the table. We're meeting tomorrow to specifically roll up our sleeves and start to work through that. So again, what we heard tonight was a continuation of the feedback that we received previously, and staff has been committed not just to the board and to the community, but our partners such as OCPS and others, and continuing to work through these issues. So Commissioner, certainly, if you continue to have questions, we're happy to, from a staff perspective, to respond to that.
So, John, like, I just had it kind of, how are you guys as far as the data goes? Like, there's some and when I'm in my data, I'm always picking places that I know, people that I know. I pick somebody's house. Like, that's actually how I found Porter Place. Yeah, and I picked my accountant's house, which is just a little office up on Michigan, and he's actually just a little office, but he's proposed to go to he's C1, he's 1.5 FAR, and he's proposed to go to a 3.0 FAR and 50 dwelling units an acre. So when you do your data for that, do you do it at 50 dwelling units an acre? I mean, like, what kind of assumptions are you making for this progressed growth? Because, you know, like, are they hitting 50 or are they hitting 25 or, you know, like 50-50 on the site? Like, just curious, like, you know, for the folks that, I know you guys have been digging into this, so.
Well, so that's one of the things I think we're struggling with perhaps is that when you look at the maximum development potential on any given property, one, is that likely? But that's also, we're not going to see every parcel build out, not just at its maximum intensity, but certainly not through the 2050 planning horizon. So, you know, you can kind of approach it from, well, what if everything did what they possibly could? Well, that ends up with we're planning for 478,000 people to join our community through 2050, but the capacity of the land use is far in excess of that. And so that's somewhat of the balancing act in that because we don't know for certainty, it'll all be adaptive to the market. Well, sure, but property values don't change overnight, and you know we're not going to get 60,000 kids overnight. We're going to get 60,000 kids over the next 26 years. So when you look at the 26 schools that may be needed over the next 26 years, some of that may start to ultimately feel more manageable. Again, recognizing the requirements of OCPS to have a seat for a kid day one. So it is somewhat of a challenge from a staff and from a technical perspective to be able to kind of work through what the numbers could mean, but what the numbers are likely to mean, and somewhat of that balancing act, if I answered your question.
I think it's good. Just, because I think it's, you know, when you just look at it and you see 50 dwelling units an acre, you can tell all that he's got some density on his site.
I know she wants to.
Yeah, I just haven't heard enough about the environmental factors, and you mentioned it, Mr. Weiss, but I don't think you expanded on it. I just want to hear more about the stormwater management, watershed in the county, the existing wetlands, the functioning wetlands, like what happens to all that? Like, it hasn't been addressed. Like, you can address transportation. I know it takes money, but it's doable. And schools, but Mother Nature, I mean, you cannot control what's going to happen with our floods, you know, in our FEMA flood zones. And so I just wanted to hear a little bit more on that topic.
And then, John, I can give it after you do. I can give an example of how it's playing out in real life.
So at the end of last year, our board adopted probably one of the most stringent wetland protection ordinances in the state. That ordinance ultimately came out of the policies that our board has adopted and reinforced over many years and ultimately decades. But the framework is actually being expanded in Vision 2050, where today we have certain environmental protections for the econ protection area. We're actually adding protection areas with Shingle Creek and other watersheds throughout Orange County. And so the regulations that are currently in place will be able to be added on to following the adoption of Vision 2050, and certainly won't be lessened. But again, I think where the board's, from the starting point that the board has today, I think they should be very proud of the steps that they've taken, the sort of the data-driven approach, and the work that's been done. So, certainly credit to the board for that. From a stormwater perspective, we've had multiple presentations to our board since Hurricane Ian. A lot of lessons learned from that. We're looking at stormwater management or basin studies, action plans. We're looking at a lot of our modeling efforts, and also implementing various, changes to, some states or some areas of the state are looking at rainfall intensity studies, changing their design stormwater. If you go to the Board of County Commissioners page, ultimately, and I can try to get you your contact information, because we've had a number of presentations before the board, in the Board of County Commissioners specifically. All the videos are online and kind of goes through the county's work program to all those points. So happy to share that information with you. And I can get you a business card to get you that link.
Yeah. So I have 3 questions. I just don't want to forget them. That's what I'm just, because I don't have a pen to actually. Yeah. So why are we doing this countywide instead of, in sections that we want intended intensity increases like others have done? The other one is, one of our concerns is that when this is implemented, everyone gets entitlements and there's no community input along the way in the process. And then the other one is, has to do with flooding too, as someone had brought up, like why, or has those flood maps were they looked at when these transect maps were placed over the county? Like, so did we compare, here's our flood zones, what are we doing there? Because it is concerning to me that around bodies of water that we're putting high densities, I really feel that we should have like maybe a few 100,000 feet from a body of water that we shouldn't be, maybe I'm exaggerating here, but we shouldn't be building up to the shore of a lake, because it's just gonna cause, all those properties are gonna be flooded. Yeah.
Just that one. I'll say, because I do work for a developer, and the county is being very proactive in implementing the basin plans. And if you're even in the basin and they don't have a basin plan, guess who's doing the county's basin plan? And they're being very proactive in that. So, we had an approved subdivision, totally approved. We could go to engineering. We went back in to move the lift station, and we're doing a full basin study that's going to help Orange County in an area. It's going to help the city of Apopka, because we have to do it for the entire basin to establish the flood. So I will tell you, Orange County staff is working hard, and I'm glad they're paying attention, and they care about what's going on in the community, and they're not just for those, I know there's a lot of fear, but they're not just letting stuff go. We have come to a grinding halt. Could very well be 4 to 6 months to stop and do a basin study to make sure the data's there. And our property is we're not touching the basin. We're not touching a wetland, we're not touching anything, we're just in the basin. So hopefully that gives you some level of comfort, for the folks that we're asking. The county is working very hard.
Okay, so I have a question and it is about the interactive map, and it's how many times do you want to see my face is really the question that I have. Because and I just pulled this from the rural settlement, but I went on the interactive map and just picked properties all over the place. And when you drill down into the interactive map and what is permitted, but then what is permitted with additional standards, or permitted as a special exception, or permitted with a special exception with provision, and in a rural settlement right now, somebody can come into the county, they can put in an application to do a borrow pit. They can do heavy industrial, concrete, cement, and asphalt plant, hazardous waste treatment, storage, and disposable facility. Why are these even something that an applicant could walk in and put the county staff through something, and these are not easy things. This isn't, I want to put an accessory dwelling building. These are heavily intense things that are right now, if you get a special exception, if you have the additional standards, you could put this in a rural settlement. And I have just as many on some of the residential that are, in the Horizon West and things. So why are they even on here? Why do you make staff have to go through this? Why do you make the applicant spend whatever money to do this? These shouldn't even be listed, in my opinion. And when anybody would go on their interactive map and they see some of the things that you're saying, oh, well, that's permissible, but you just need to get additional standards. I don't understand that.
So I'm not sure I can speak to the full context as to the properties you may be identifying or the correlation tables between the different place types and the transects and the allowed uses. As I kind of spoke on the environmental and school and transportation coordination, my level of involvement in the plan has really been more limited on some of the strategic and policy focus. I certainly may look to phone a friend if there, somebody in the planning division that may be prepared to more speak to those concerns and or a possible misunderstanding about the way information is being presented, or perhaps an important need to clarify or correct certain terms and uses. And so it's not something I can sit here with full knowledge of and be able to respond to.
I will say that they have been responsive when they've identified uses.
Yeah, no.
And because this is a rural area, some of those may actually be permitted uses today.
But
So,
this is not a rural, this
Yeah.
is a rural settlement. We only have
But
21 of those. It's
definitely the reason for this meeting, though, is to express the concerns and then have staff look at that and fix it, so that we could get to the point where the Board of County Commissioners are comfortable approving it. So definitely these concerns. So those 3 questions that I had, how quick can you answer those?
From a countywide perspective, and I think that was your first
Yeah,
question.
the
as well, is this being
countywide
done
rather
countywide?
than
So-
in the intentional areas.
So got to sort of, again, draw a distinction between Vision 2050 and Orange Code and the form-based components of Orange Code. When we look at sort of an update, and in this case, a rewrite of the comprehensive plan, the problems weren't just an urban problem. I mean, we think we've heard very clearly from the board about the importance of protecting the rural areas and the importance of directing growth towards infill. And so when we look at the challenges of the continued growth, I think we did try to approach it more strategically and holistically from a countywide perspective. And so, I think if we had just said, okay, because we've already got experience with a form-based code today in the International Drive corridor. And so it wasn't, this wasn't an urban problem. This is a countywide problem in terms of managing the growth, protecting Ms. Foresters and the rural settlements. We did a preservation district recently in response to, some of the challenges there. We've got experience in Horizon West and other areas. And so again, we sort of knew we needed to tackle it from a countywide perspective because of Lake Pickett, because of Horizon West, because of International Drive.
But International Drive, we just did that. We really haven't had the chance to really see how that works out. Horizons West we have, and we've seen it. It's not really working, especially when it comes to transportation. And, the mix of like commercial and residential and stuff like that, it hasn't really been a success. So I guess my question, back to the question I just asked, why can't we just, or why isn't these landowners applying for the entitlement rather than us just countywide giving people entitlements?
So I was trying to answer the countywide
Yeah, so I'm just
perspective.
changing the question to get to maybe the answer, or I'm not looking for an answer, I'm just trying to explain what I really mean by my question is like, so, with the concern. So our concern is that we're doing this countywide, giving people entitlements.
Right.
If there's a mistake, we won't be able to take it back. So why don't we allow them to apply for the entitlement, and will give us also an opportunity to have that community involvement rather than doing the blanket countywide, giving everybody entitlements automatically?
So I think in terms of the overall framework, the administrative refluming and rezoning of the county does not, either by definition or certainly not, it's not intended to diminish the opportunities for public comment. There, if you're rezoning from one transect to another, that's an application, that's a public hearing that would have to be required before the Board of County Commissioners. So the place types and certain projects, and I know Alberto and the planning team have presented the types of projects that would ultimately come to the board in terms of some form of master plan. And it's not a PD, but there is still an opportunity for, but not just a DRC review, but also a Board of County Commissioners hearing for certain aspects of the plan. Certainly the Planning Division can talk more about how that, in response to the board feedback that we've received, how those processes may be evolving. I can't speak to that today.
I think she's kind of talking about the site specific, that when you.
Well, so the future land use, which are the transects, is going to be applied county sectors. Going to be, well, it's the same.
Sectors and place types replace future land use, transects replace zoning.
Which now I just thought of another concern. Thank you very much, as if I didn't have enough. Changing definitions of what things mean, and how does that connect with the processes that we're used to, and trying to understand how that works, because I see as future land use map designations. Are these transects, which are sectors, but am I speaking the same language or definition that planning is speaking? That's how I thought it was, but now I may be wrong. Maybe I misunderstood this entire time. But with today's definitions of what that means is that, and this is another concern, this actually came up in our meeting too, case law. So what does that mean when we go to court now, that we have different definitions now, things that have not been tried before? How is that going to interpret in the courts if something goes to court? So rezonings are handled differently in the court than future land use amendments. Now are we using the term future land use amendments anymore? Because now if someone changes their so it's this whole new definitions. What does that mean? What's the case law? What's going to happen with that? So what rights, as I understand it, are right now, our future land use amendments comes before the board. If we don't feel that there's enough schools, if we don't feel there's a transportation, if we don't feel, even the public's like, this is not right for our neighborhood, we can deny it. And it's been upheld in court and in front of the governor's, board that, we can do that. Now there's going to be a different term, these sectors. What does that mean? Do we have those same rights if someone wants to change, to a different sector or transect, right? That we have as we had with future land use. I mean, is that even in state statutes for us to even find something like that defines that or tells us what rights we have? Because it's new. Rezoning, let's say that we give those, and we're calling them entitlements because it is entitlements. At least I think we could agree that word would still mean the same thing. So we have, everyone gets their future land use amendments or sectors or transects, whatever we're going to call them, right? Across the board, across Orange County. Under the way things are today, we have more power to say no. But that's going to be done across the board. Rezoning, they'll have to rezone, the way I understood, they would also get their rezoning based on where they are in the map. But if they want to change their rezoning, we don't have the same power that we have when it comes to future land use changes. So that's where I'm saying, like, all of our power is going to be taken away.
I don't think that's true at all.
And the staff will get it, yeah, because the staff, there's more power with the staff to be able to make decisions on, so if they already have their rezoning, they already have they're in their sector, they're in their neighborhood, whatever, like all the terms are, right? It's just going to go to the DRC. So, I mean, it's not going to, I think the whole intention that I've been hearing from staff is that everyone will know what they're getting. So there's no reason to come before the board. Because
I'm not sure I've ever heard that statement from staff's perspective.
That's
how
I understood it.
I mean, pretty much, yeah. Now it's granted, and they just get to go forward.
So
back to my question again is like, at least I feel really uncomfortable with giving entitlements where because I can't go through every single property in District 5 and tell you if we're making the right choice or not. I cannot do that. The public, probably 0.0001% of our county residents even know about this and know to check their property on these maps. And then the maps on top of that isn't correct. So I checked my property and it wasn't right. And then I reached out to Olin and then it got fixed. But before I forget too, on my property, I was told that Orange Code, we weren't going to be more restrictive than what we currently are, but my property is being more restrictive. They're changing my side setbacks from 10 feet to 20 feet, which is to me more restrictive. So, and the board hasn't approved that. These are the questions I have. So we can't give entitlements and do all this without us being able to look at each individual property and having community input. So I agree with the solutions that was presented by my work group that we should have intended areas where this is applied. And, but not other established areas. And if anything, let's see how that goes before we do it countywide. And maybe 20 years from now, it's such a success that we start expanding it. But, as of today, I just don't think we should go ahead and blanket the whole county and give these entitlements, especially when we don't know what's going to happen. Like, it's just, it's dangerous. And it hasn't been tested either. Like this, we'll be the first ones really to do this, besides Miami, who isn't really, they weren't happy with theirs. We don't want to be Miami. We are different from Miami too. That's the other thing. Which someone said it can't be like a one-to-one. Like you have to, we're unique. We sprawled. We shouldn't. If they had thought in the 80s, done this better in the 80s, we wouldn't be where we are today. Definitely, lots of mistakes have been made over the decades, but we don't want to make another one. We want to be intentional. And I know I've heard Alberto say this is intentional, but that was the plan, right? To make this intentional, our growth, but we can't do this. This is not intentional, like having it countywide. I think we need to do smaller areas.
Let me briefly respond, and I know we're late in the evening. The plan today is structured around it being the entire county. It would be a major change. Basically, we'd start not starting over in terms of total concepts, but we'd be starting over with basically transmittal, and we'd have to go back to the drawing board and basically combine two plan documents together to keep Vision 2050 and our current comprehensive plan in some form. It'd become a bigger document and certainly a more complicated document from that perspective. Not to say that we can't do it, but it would certainly require board direction and be a major pivot from where we've been headed. The terminology is changing, but the concepts really remain the same. In terms of, we talk about market areas and sectors, and again, it sort of speaks to organizing framework. The place types themselves are basically the functional equivalent of future land use. Different term, probably maybe didn't need to be a different term, but it's a different term. But that's where densities and intensities and ultimately entitlements are ultimately conveyed. When you look at the transects, which is now zoning, the zoning today is effectively the performance standards. How tall your buildings can be, what your setbacks are, your impervious coverage ratios, parking requirements, maybe a little bit more definition of uses. And there's a correlation table between your future land use and what zoning districts are allowed within that. That correlation table between sectors, place types, and your transects, that correlation table, there's a translation of that correlation table within Vision 2050 and Orange Code as well. So there's a high level of predictability about how the different sectors translate to different place types, which then and densities and intensities and certain uses within those place types, and then ultimately how those translate to the transects or the districts and what those associated performance standards are. So the terminology is a little bit different, but the concepts aren't new, and they're certainly not unproven from a case law and from a board's ability to, approve both legislative actions and quasi-judicial actions. And so I think the staff feels confident in the board's ability to adopt this and or implement and defend the decisions that it may take into the future.
Sorry, can you repeat what you just said?
So should the board choose to move forward?
Do you feel comfortable with what?
Their ability to defend it.
To defend it.
Like,
Okay.
they're put sound policies in place that they're comfortable that if it does go to court that they can defend them, because even though it's a different type of implementation, they're following rules and laws and policies and making sure things are in place that they're not going wonky where they're not going to get
But in terms of the
If you, so you could defend it if a developer,
or if the Board of County Commissioners denies a request.
but the people, thanks to Tallahassee, can't sue really anymore. So what can they do?
But that's where ultimately, if you're claiming that certain public rights were taken away, the converse of that is more responsibility was placed on the Board of County Commissioners and the board and the elected officials to make those decisions.
Okay, but you're asking us to make these decisions now, countywide, where we may not be sure. I mean, I don't know where you live, and I don't know what's happening in your neighborhood, but then I'm going to just blindly approve some change for your address. But the way we have it today, it's countywide. That's the whole problem. But today we see each individual property come before us, and we could see it, and we could hear from the residents, and we know that it's going to have schools, it's going to have transportation, it's going to have, well, I wish we considered mass transit. We don't right now. But these are the things that this can be good. By making things that, where we kind of went wrong, let's fix some things, but we can't just, the policies, some of them are really good. They're vague though, so we do have to fix some of that though. But the entitlements are the problem. Once they're given, we can't take it back. There's no concurrency, no. Once we give someone, your property is going to be and your neighbor is going to be at 20 dwelling units per acre. I'm just throwing this out there. But so after this is implemented, how do we then go to the developer and be like, well, hey, if you really want this, you're going to have to pay a proportionate share of this. You're going to have to give so many acres to the school board. You're going to have to give so many acres to a park. You're going to have to make sure you have a bus stop in front of your property or, a bus shelter or like all those things that we could kind of like now negotiate with developers will be all taken away. And, some of those things we should even work into this too, that if they do get this house, let's make sure, like if you're going to do apartment building, you should have a bus shelter in front of it. Like there's some things that we should be asking for that we're not, some things are missing. It could be better, the sidewalks, being wide enough, trees that are there. And I know I mentioned it, hopefully you implemented it now. You have to tell me where, but there were some concerns with the way it was before. It's just, right now it should be a living document where we're fixing it before it gets to transmittal for approval. Before it gets to the board for approval. But that's the purpose of this meeting, to just have all these concerns and, make sure that these things are fixed, it just gets better. I do want to approve Vision 2050, but it has to be something that we're comfortable with and is way better. And I know everyone wants to go to bed.
Yeah, and one of the things that I brought up tonight was the hotel usage. I really would like you to look at that as a special exception, because we've now, unfortunately, have the consequences of that, which, again, it's another topic, but we have to land this plane, okay? I think that you've heard a lot of feedback from this community, and I'm so appreciative for everybody who hung in there, because your passion and your desire to be heard, and I worried about this from day one. I've been very open about it. I do want to thank you, though, and I see some of our other folks who are here who have listened, but even with the listening, I haven't covered everything. I'm trying. I feel like I'm on overtime trying to cover this because I'm on a time clock of what you're trying to make us do. And maybe we can look at it differently. Maybe, and the concurrency part also with the municipalities. That's a very valid conversation, because if they're not doing what we're doing, I'm literally 2 lots away from the city of Edgewood, literally. So I just think it's a great example. And then the school system, I'm glad that that's finally happening. I think it should have happened a while ago, but it's happening. And again, the thing that keeps me up is the blanket, honestly. And I think and all of you guys have worked so profusely on this, and so thankful, even Eric, for for all your work. But I'm like losing my voice at this point too. So, but let's land the plane. I think we can end it here. Thank you, John, and thank you, Alberto, for listening. Umberto, Brian in the back who doesn't want to be seen, and your team.
Yeah, I do want to say thank you to staff because, when we had those community meetings and you all heard the residents and you made changes, that was awesome, but we just need to keep making changes. We still have more work to do, and I want to get there. I really do. And I'm confident we can. Just have to be open-minded and listen to the commissioners and the residents and all of our concerns. Do you want to say something? Okay, so we're landing it. There we go. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night.